There are roads in Seattle where drivers stop answering their phones, where GPS coordinates lead to places that shouldn't exist, where the same faces appear in rearview mirrors night after night, even though those people died decades ago. Tonight, you're about to discover why locals avoid certain stretches of highway after dark, why some roads have unofficial names whispered only in passing, and why the most dangerous thing on Seattle's asphalt isn't the traffic. It's what's been waiting there long before the roads were ever built. Welcome to Verified Fears, and whatever you do, don't look in your rearview mirror while watching this. You've driven Highway 2 through Stevens Pass 100 times, maybe more. The winding mountain road between Seattle and Wenatchee is second nature by now, every curve and switchback memorized. But tonight feels different. The June air should be warm, yet your breath fogs the windshield as you round the bend near milepost 64, where the old Iron Goat Trail parking lot sits dark and abandoned. Your phone has been acting strange for the last 20 miles, GPS flickering between current roads and routes that don't exist anymore, showing names like Wellington and Ty overlapping the highway markers. When your check engine light suddenly blazes red and the car shudders to a stop, you manage to coast into that empty lot, gravel crunching under your tires in the oppressive silence. The engine won't turn over. You try 3 times, then 5, then 10. But nothing happens except a clicking sound that echoes too loudly in the mountain stillness. Your phone shows no signal, which isn't unusual up here. But what makes your skin prickle is that it's reading 4 Guians a.m. when your dashboard clock clearly shows 11:47 p.m. You check your watch and it's stopped completely, the second hand frozen between the 3 and 4. Outside, the forest is darker than it should be. The kind of absolute blackness that seems to swallow your headlights rather than be pushed back by them. You flip them off to save the battery and immediately regret it. The darkness presses against your windows like something physical, something waiting. That's when you notice the cold. It's not the crisp mountain chill you expected. It's the bone-deep freeze of January, the kind that makes your joints ache and your teeth chatter. You watch in growing horror as frost begins to spread across your windshield from the outside, creeping in crystalline patterns that seem almost deliberate, almost like fingers. The ice forms words, though you don't want to read them. Turn back. The letters are jagged and desperate, written by something that understands what's coming. Your breath comes faster now, fogging the interior glass, and when you wipe it away to see better, you wish you hadn't. There are lights in the forest, not flashlights or headlamps, but the warm, flickering glow of oil lanterns. Dozens of them, moving through the trees in a line. You can hear voices now, muffled and distant, calling out to each other in accents that sound wrong for the present day. Someone shouts about the snow, about being trapped, about needing to dig out before the weight brings everything down. But there is no snow. It's June. The forest floor is covered in pine needles and moss, not the 20-foot drifts the voices describe with rising panic. You press your face against the window, trying to understand what you're seeing. And that's when you realize the lights aren't moving forward. They're moving down, descending into the earth as if the ground itself is swallowing them. Your hands are shaking as you try. Your phone again, but the screen shows only a date. March 1st, 1910. The time reads 3:58 a.m. You're watching it tick toward 4 hours when the sound begins. It starts as a low rumble, so deep you feel it in your chest rather than hear it with your ears. The car begins to vibrate, gently at first, then violently, and you grip the steering wheel as the rumbling grows into a roar that drowns out your own screaming. Through the frost-covered windshield, you see it, a wall of white rushing down the mountain, massive and unstoppable, carrying trees and boulders and something that looks like train cars, their wooden frames splintering as they tumble. But the avalanche isn't made of snow. It's made of light, a ghostly luminescence that illuminates faces trapped in the cascade. Mouths open in eternal screams, hands reaching out for salvation that never came. The wave crashes over your car, and you're certain you're about to die, buried under tons of spectral snow and the weight of a century-old tragedy. But instead of impact, there's only cold. A cold so intense it burns. Your windows frost completely opaque, turning your car into a tomb of ice. You can't see out, but you can hear them. They're all around your vehicle now, the voices of 96 souls who never left this mountain. They're knocking on your windows, pressing their faces against the glass, leaving handprints that steam and freeze simultaneously. A woman's voice, clear despite the thickness of the frost, begs you to help her find her children. A man shouts about locomotive sparks and forest fires, about how the trees should have protected them, how it's all someone's fault. Another voice, younger, just keeps repeating the same phrase over and over. I felt the car lift and then we were flying. You close your eyes, but that makes it worse because now you can see them in your mind. The passengers and railroad workers who went to sleep thinking they'd wake up in Seattle, who had no idea that lightning and thunder and rain on old snow would send them tumbling 150 feet into a river gorge. You see a conductor named Ira Clay, buried 6 feet under, clawing his way up through the suffocating white. You see Mrs. Williams Starrett, pulled from the wreckage alive, only to discover her husband, father, mother, and 2 of her 3 children dead around her. You see 35 passengers and 58 railroad workers and 3 men sleeping in cabins, all of them gone in the space of a few terrible seconds when the mountain decided to take back what the railroad had carved away. When you open your eyes again, your phone is ringing. The sound is impossibly loud in the frozen interior of your car, and you fumble for it with numb fingers. The caller ID shows only a string of numbers that could be a date. 03/01/1910. You don't want to answer. Every instinct screams at you to ignore it, to throw the phone into the back seat, to cover your ears. But your thumb moves of its own accord, accepting the call, and what you hear turns your blood to ice water. It's screaming, dozens of voices screaming at once, overlapping in a cacophony of terror and confusion and betrayal. Under the screams, you hear the groan of metal being crushed, the crack of trees snapping like toothpicks, the thunderous roar of the mountain coming down. And then, cutting through it all, a single voice speaking directly to you. Tell them we're still here. Tell them Wellington remembers. The call ends. The frost on your windows begins to recede, melting away in reverse, revealing the dark forest once more. The temperature in your car slowly rises, though you're still shaking so hard you can barely hold the steering wheel. Your phone now shows the correct time, 12:03 a.m., and your dashboard clock agrees. The check engine light is off. When you turn the key with trembling hands, the engine roars to life as if nothing had ever been wrong. The normalcy of it feels like a slap, like the mountain releasing you from whatever grip it had held you in for the last 15 minutes. Or had it been hours? You're not sure anymore. Time feels slippery here, unreliable. Like the calendar itself has thin places where the past bleeds through. You should leave. You should put the car in gear and drive until you're down in the valley, surrounded by people and lights and the comfortable mundanity of gas stations and diners. But you can't move yet, because they're still there, at the edge of your headlights' reach. You can see them now without the frost obscuring your view. translucent figures standing in a line along the tree line, watching you. 96 of them, you're sure, though you don't dare count. Some are in night clothes, having been asleep when death came. Others wear the uniforms of railroad workers, caps still on their heads, gloves on their hands. There's a woman holding the hand of a child who can't be more than 5 years old. There's a man with a shovel, still trying to dig his way out. They're all just standing there, looking at you with eyes that reflect your headlights like animals caught on a dark road. And then they start to walk toward your car. Not running, not rushing, just walking with the patient inevitability of people who have all the time in the world, because time means nothing to them anymore. Your foot finds the gas pedal, and you reverse out of the parking lot so fast your tires spray gravel against the trees. You spin the wheel, pointing the car back toward civilization, toward the world of the living. In your rearview mirror, you can see them still coming, still walking, their pace never changing even as you accelerate away. They're following the road, following you. And you understand, with absolute certainty, that they'll always be following this road, waiting for the next car that breaks down in the wrong place at the wrong time, waiting for someone else to bear witness to what happened here, when the mountain took 96 souls and never gave them back. You don't stop driving until you reach Sultan, 40 miles down the mountain, where you pull into a 24-hour gas station and sit under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by people pumping gas and buying coffee. Normal people doing normal things. But when you look at your phone to text someone, anyone, that you're okay, you find a voicemail from that impossible number. You don't remember it going to voicemail. You don't remember missing a second call. Your finger hovers over the play button, and you know you shouldn't listen. Know that some doors should stay closed once you've escaped through them. But you press play anyway, and through the static and the sound of wind howling through a mountain pass, you hear that same voice whisper, "We'll be waiting. We're always waiting. Tell them about Wellington." The voicemail ends, and when you look up, there's a man standing outside your window. He's solid, real, wearing a gas station uniform and looking concerned. He taps on the glass and you roll it down with shaking hands. He asks if you're all right, says you look like you've seen a ghost, and the laugh that escapes your throat sounds hysterical even to your own ears. You tell him you're fine, just tired from the drive, and he nods, but doesn't look convinced. As you roll the window back up and prepare to drive away, he leans down one more time and says something that stops your heart. He says his great-great-grandfather worked for the Great Northern Railway. Says he died in an accident up at Stevens Pass in 1910. Says sometimes he swears he can hear his ancestor calling from the mountains, asking why no one remembers their names. You drive home in silence, radio off, phone face down in the passenger seat. But you know you'll never take Highway 2 again. And you know that on cold nights, even in the middle of summer, you'll wake up to the sound of thunder and screaming. And you'll see frost creeping across your bedroom window, spelling out words you've already memorized. Turn back. Turn back. Turn back. Because the mountain doesn't forget. And the 96 souls who died at Wellington are still there, still waiting, still reaching out through the thin places where the past refuses to stay buried. The dare came the way all stupid teenage decisions do, wrapped in bravado and fueled by the kind of reckless confidence that only exists when you're 17 and convinced you're immortal. The teenager stood at the edge of Maltby Cemetery just after midnight, flashlight in hand, while his 3 friends waited by the car with their phones out, ready to film proof that he'd actually done it. They'd driven up Paradise Valley Road in Woodinville with the windows down and music blasting, the kind of carefree chaos that belongs to a Friday night when tomorrow is still safely distant. But now, standing at the rusted iron gate with the weight of the darkness pressing down from the trees, the confidence felt thinner than it had 20 minutes ago. The legend was simple enough. Find the 13 steps that descended into the earth somewhere in the older section of the cemetery, the part that dated back to the early 1900s, where Seattle's first settlers rested under moss-covered stones. Walk down all 13 steps while counting them aloud. At the bottom, turn around. See what waited there. The variations in the story disagreed on what exactly you'd see. Some said a vision of hell itself. Others claimed you'd glimpse your own death. Still others whispered that you'd see nothing at all because you'd simply cease to exist after the 13th step. But everyone agreed on one thing. The steps counted differently depending on which direction you moved. He pushed through the gate, the metal groaning in protest, and made his way past the newer graves near the entrance. His friends' voices followed him for the first 100 yards, calling out encouragement and crude jokes meant to mask their own nervousness. But the deeper he walked into the cemetery, the quieter their voices became until he couldn't hear them at all. The silence wasn't natural. It was the kind of absolute absence of sound that makes your ears ring, as if someone had wrapped the entire graveyard in cotton wool and sealed it away from the living world. His footsteps on the grass made no noise. The wind moving through the trees created no rustle. Even his own breathing seemed muted, as if the air itself had decided to hold still. He found the steps 20 minutes later, tucked behind a massive cedar tree whose roots had buckled several of the surrounding headstones. They shouldn't have been there. The cemetery records showed no family crypts in this section, no underground tombs that would require a staircase descending into the earth. But there they were, carved from dark stone that seemed to absorb his flashlight beam rather than reflect it. The stairs led down into blackness so complete it looked solid, like he could reach out and touch it. 13 steps, each one slightly worn in the center, as if countless feet had walked this path before him. He pulled out his phone to take a photo for proof, but the screen had gone dark despite showing a full battery moments before. The teenager hesitated at the top, that little voice of self-preservation screaming at him to turn back, to run, to choose literally anything else. But his friends were waiting. The story would spread through school by Monday if he chickened out now. He'd become the kid who talked big but couldn't follow through, and that felt worse than any legend about cursed stairs. So he stepped down onto the first step and whispered, 1. The stone was ice cold beneath his shoe, cold enough that he could feel it through the rubber sole. He took another step. 2. The darkness seemed to thicken around him. 3. The last traces of moonlight disappeared. 4. He couldn't see the top of the stairs anymore when he glanced back. By the time he reached 7, he realized he couldn't hear his own voice anymore. His lips moved, forming the words, but no sound emerged. The silence had become so profound, it felt like pressure against his eardrums, building and building until he was sure they would burst. At 9, he noticed his flashlight had died completely, but somehow he could still see the steps beneath his feet, lit by a sourceless gray glow that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. At 11, he looked up to check how far he'd descended and saw nothing above him except more darkness. The stairs should have ended by now. He'd counted carefully, each step measured and deliberate. But when he whispered 12, and then finally 13, he was still standing on another step with more darkness yawning below. He stopped, confusion cutting through the fear. He'd counted 13. The legend said 13 steps. But he was standing on what should have been the 13th step, and there were clearly more stairs below him, descending further into the earth than should be possible. The teenager looked back up, and that's when he understood the first terrible truth about this place. When he counted the steps he'd already walked, carefully pointing at each one and mouthing the numbers, there were only 6. 6 steps from where he stood to the top, where he could see the faint outline of the cemetery grounds. He'd walked down 13 stairs, but only 6 existed behind him. The wrongness of it made his stomach lurch. Math didn't work like that. Space didn't work like that. He turned back to face downward, and the darkness at the bottom of the stairs had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. There was something down there. Something that made shapes at the edge of his vision. Human figures standing motionless, watching him with an attention so intense he could feel it crawling across his skin like insects. He tried to call out, to ask who they were, but his voice still wouldn't work. The silence had stolen it. Or maybe the stairs had. Or maybe down here there was no difference between stealing and simply ceasing to allow. Then he noticed his watch had stopped. Not just stopped. The second hand was moving backward, ticking counterclockwise, in quick, jerky movements. He pulled out his dead phone and it flickered to life, just long enough for him to see the screen. 12 hours a.m., 11:59 p.m., 11:58 p.m. Time was running in reverse. Or maybe he was moving forward through time that had decided to flow the wrong direction. Above him, he heard his friends calling his name. Their voices distorted and stretched like audio played in reverse. They sounded terrified. They sounded like they'd been calling for hours. The teenager made the decision to climb back up. Forget the legend, forget the dare. Forget what he'd see if he turned around at the bottom. He needed out. He needed the real world where watches moved forward and stairs stayed the same number no matter which way you counted them. But with his first step upward, something grabbed his ankle. The hand was ice cold and impossibly strong, fingers wrapping around his leg like steel cables. He looked down and saw a woman's hand reaching up from the step below him, arm extending from the stone itself as if the stairs were made of liquid rather than solid rock. Her fingernails were black with grave dirt, her skin the waxy gray of something that had been dead for a very long time. More hands emerged. They pushed at his back, pressed against his shoulders, guided him up the stairs with gentle but insistent pressure. He couldn't fight them. There were too many. Dozens of cold fingers urging him higher, forcing him to climb. He tried counting again, tried to figure out how many steps remained between him and the surface. But the numbers wouldn't stick in his mind. Every time he reached 4, he'd suddenly be back at 1 without any memory of starting over. The hands kept pushing. Something whispered in his ear in a language that predated English. Words that tasted like copper and smelled like turned earth. When he finally stumbled out of the stairwell and onto the cemetery grass, his friends were there, grabbing him, shouting questions he couldn't process. They looked wrong somehow. Older, exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes, like they hadn't slept in days. One of them was crying. Another kept saying, 3 hours, man. You've been gone for 3 hours, over and over like a broken record. But the teenager's watch showed only 15 minutes had passed. 15 minutes that felt like seconds and hours simultaneously. 15 minutes that had somehow aged his friend's years while leaving him untouched. Or maybe not untouched. His left shoe was missing. His ankle bore a handprint burned into the skin, each finger clearly visible. The flesh underneath blackened like frostbite. They dragged him back to the car, supporting his weight between them because his legs wouldn't work properly anymore. He kept trying to tell them what happened, but the words came out wrong, in the wrong order. sentences that started in the present and ended in the past. Behind them, the cemetery sat quiet under the moon. If anyone had been watching, they would have seen the 13 steps slowly sinking back into the earth, the stone dissolving like sugar in water, erasing themselves from reality until the next time someone came looking. Because the steps weren't always there. They appeared only when needed, when someone with enough arrogance or curiosity or desperation came calling. And they would appear again. In the car, the teenager finally managed to form a coherent sentence. "I didn't turn around," he said, voice hoarse from disuse or screaming or perhaps from traveling through time that moved backward. "I didn't look. I didn't see what was at the bottom." His friends nodded, relieved, thinking he'd escaped the worst of the legend. But he knew better. He'd felt what was down there, felt the attention of something vast and patient and endlessly hungry. He'd felt it counting him, measuring him, filing him away for future reference. And he understood with absolute certainty that he would go back. Not because he wanted to, but because the stairs had touched him now, had marked him with that handprint on his ankle, and marked things belonged to the dark places beneath the earth. For weeks afterward, he counted everything obsessively. Steps to his classroom, stairs to the second floor of his house, cracks in the sidewalk on his walk to school. Every time he reached 13 of anything, his vision would blur and he'd lose time, sometimes seconds, sometimes minutes. He'd find himself standing in places with no memory of walking there. His phone showing times that didn't match what his watch read, people asking him why he looked so pale, so shaken, so much older than 17 should allow. He stopped sleeping because his dreams were full of stairs that descended forever, full of cold hands pushing him deeper, full of a darkness that whispered his name in that ancient language he somehow understood now. His friends stopped calling after the second week. They'd seen him zone out mid-conversation, eyes fixed on empty air, lips moving as he counted something invisible. They'd noticed how he avoided staircases, how he'd take elevators or walk around entire buildings rather than climb or descend. They'd watched him become someone else, something else, someone whose mind was stuck between the cemetery grounds and 13 steps that existed in 6 steps worth of space. The teenager knew what they whispered about him at school, knew they called him crazy, traumatized, broken. Let them. It was easier than explaining that he hadn't escaped at all, that he was still down there, would always be down there, trapped in the moment between 13 and 6, between descent and ascent, between the living world and the dark. And on quiet nights, when the moon was dark and the wind was still, he'd wake to find grave dirt under his fingernails and the smell of old stone in his clothes. He'd check his ankle and see the handprint had spread, the blackened flesh creeping up his calf in finger-width lines, like a vine growing in reverse, pulling him back down, back to Maltby Cemetery, back to the 13 steps that appeared only at night, back to the bottom he'd never reached, where something patient and cold and impossibly old was still waiting for him to finally turn around. You've crossed Deception Pass Bridge a dozen times, maybe more, always during the day when the sun turns the water below into something manageable, something that looks like it belongs in a postcard. But tonight is different. Tonight you're driving north from Seattle at midnight, heading to Anacortes to catch the early morning ferry to the San Juans. And the bridge rises ahead of you like a skeletal hand reaching across the darkness. The fog has rolled in thick. The kind of dense white nothing that locals call mystery season. where you can't see 10 feet beyond your headlights, and the world shrinks to just you and the road, and the two-lane span of steel connecting Whidbey Island to Fidalgo Island across 180 feet of churning water. The singing starts when you're halfway across the first span. At first you think it's your radio, some late-night station bleeding through the static. But when you check, the radio is off. Has been off since you left the city. The voice is female, high and clear and heartbreakingly beautiful. And it's singing in a language you've never heard before, but somehow understand in your bones. The melody speaks of longing, of the space between land and sea, of transformation and sacrifice, and a love that required drowning to survive. Your hands tighten on the steering wheel as you force yourself to focus on the road. But the singing grows louder, more insistent, until it feels like it's coming from inside your own head. You try to speed up, to get across the bridge faster, but your foot won't press the accelerator. Instead, it eases off the gas entirely, and you watch in horror as your car slows to a crawl, then stops completely in the center of the bridge. You're blocking both lanes, but there are no other cars. Haven't been for miles, which should be impossible for a highway this popular. The engine is still running, but when you try to shift into drive, your hand moves to the key instead and turns the ignition off. The sudden silence is deafening, broken only by that singing, that impossible voice that makes your chest ache with a sadness you can't explain. You need to get out of the car. You need to see where the singing is coming from. The thought feels both completely wrong and absolutely necessary. Your door opens before you consciously decide to reach for the handle. The fog envelops you immediately, cold and wet against your skin, carrying the smell of salt and kelp and something else. Something ancient and green and alive in ways that the surface world isn't. You walk to the edge of the bridge, where a low concrete barrier is all that separates you from the 180-foot drop to the water below. The singing is clearer now, rising from beneath the bridge, and when you lean over to look down, you see her. She's standing on the water itself, or perhaps just beneath its surface, and her face is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Her features shimmer between human and something else, something that belongs to the cold, dark depths where sunlight never reaches. She looks up at you and smiles, and the expression holds such promise, such understanding of every lonely moment you've ever experienced, that you find yourself smiling back. She raises one hand. You can see barnacles growing on her wrist, see the way her fingers are slightly webbed, and beckons. The singing intensifies, joined now by other voices. Dozens of them, hundreds, all calling you down to join them in the water. You climb onto the barrier. You don't remember deciding to do it. You don't remember your legs moving or your hands gripping the cold concrete. But here you are, standing on the edge, looking down into water that churns with currents exceeding 9 knots. Where the Strait of Juan de Fuca collides with Puget Sound to create standing waves and whirlpools and riptides that have swallowed boats whole. The maiden? Because that's what she is, you understand now. Coqualalwoot. The woman who married the sea, who chose drowning over a life on land, speaks to you without moving her lips. Her voice blooms directly in your mind, telling you about the beauty beneath the waves, about the kinship between flesh and water, about how the transformation only hurts for a moment before you become something better, something that belongs to the deep places where pressure and darkness forge new kinds of existence. She tells you about the others who came before, about the 425 people who jumped from this bridge since it opened in 1935, about how each one found peace in the water, about how their voices joined the eternal song that flows through the pass. You look down at your hands, and they're already changing. You can see your skin taking on that waxy, translucent quality. See the faint suggestion of scales forming at your wrists. Your hair moves in a wind that doesn't exist, floating around your face as if you're already underwater. The maiden smiles wider, and you see that her teeth are sharp, predatory, nothing human about them at all. Behind her, other figures rise from the water, men and women and children, all of them drowned, all of them wearing the evidence of their deaths. Some have necks bent at impossible angles from the impact of hitting the water from 180 feet up. Others are bloated and blue, lungs full of the salt water that killed them. And mixed among them are older ghosts. Chinese migrants from the 1880s, still wrapped in the burlap bags that Ben Urey and his partner used when they smuggled human cargo, still bearing the marks of the ropes that drowned them when customs agents approached. The truth hits you like cold water. This isn't salvation. This is hunger. The maiden isn't offering transformation. She's luring you to feed whatever lives in the depths beneath this bridge, whatever feeds on despair and the brief flight between jumping and impact. But even knowing this, even understanding that you're being manipulated, you can't make yourself step down from the barrier. The singing has wound itself around your will, has replaced your thoughts with its melody, has made the idea of jumping feel not like death, but like coming home. You look down at the water 180 feet below, and it looks soft, welcoming, like falling into bed after a long day. The maiden extends both hands now, and you can see the kelp growing from her scalp where hair should be, can see the way barnacles have completely covered her arms from elbow to fingertip. You lean forward. Gravity begins to take hold. And then something breaks the spell. A sound from behind you, a car horn blaring long and loud, shattering the singing like glass. You stumble backward off the barrier, landing hard on the bridge deck, and the pain of impact brings clarity rushing back. You turn and see headlights, see a semi-truck that definitely wasn't there seconds ago, the driver leaning out his window and shouting something you can't quite hear over the ringing in your ears. The fog is lifting rapidly, being blown away by a wind that carries the smell of diesel and asphalt. Ordinary smells that anchor you back to the ordinary world. You run to your car on legs that don't feel like your own, fumbling with the door handle, falling into the driver's seat. Your hands shake so badly you can barely get the key in the ignition. But when you finally do and the engine roars to life, you floor the accelerator without checking mirrors or looking back. The truck driver is still shouting, probably asking if you're okay, probably wanting to know why you were standing on the edge of the barrier in the middle of the night. You don't stop to explain. You can't stop. The singing is still there, quieter now but persistent. And you know if you stay on this bridge one more second, you'll be back on that barrier, back leaning forward into empty air, back joining the maiden and her collection of drowned souls. You make it to the Fidalgo Island side and keep driving, taking the first exit you see, pulling into a rest stop parking lot where you finally let yourself stop and breathe. Your phone shows 45 minutes have passed since you entered the bridge, though it felt like seconds. 45 minutes you don't remember? 45 minutes of your life simply gone, absorbed by whatever ancient thing lives in those waters. You check your hands and the scales are gone. But when you look closely in the rearview mirror, you can see a faint green tint to your skin that wasn't there before. When you touch your neck, your fingers come away wet with salt water. Though you never went near the water, never left the bridge deck, you sit in that parking lot for 3 hours until the sun rises and paints everything in reassuring shades of gold and pink. When you finally work up the courage to drive back past the bridge, you need to get home somehow, and there's no other route. You keep your windows rolled up and your radio blasting at full volume Anything to drown out the possibility of hearing that singing again. As you approach the span, you see something that makes your blood run cold. There are others on the barrier. 3 of them, spread out along the bridge's length, all standing exactly as you were standing, all looking down at the water with expressions of rapturous peace. You want to stop, want to save them, but you know you can't. If you stop, you'll hear the singing again. If you hear the singing, you'll never leave. So you drive past them, hating yourself, and you watch in your rearview mirror as first one, then another, then the third simply steps forward into empty air. They don't fall, they dive, graceful and deliberate, as if jumping into a swimming pool rather than plummeting to their deaths. You see splashes far below, see the fog beginning to roll back in, even though it's full daylight. And beneath the fog, just for a second, you see her. The maiden, Kokwalalwut. She's looking up at your car, at you, and she's smiling. She knows you'll come back. Everyone comes back eventually. The bridge calls to thousands of drivers every day, and some of them are more susceptible than others, more lonely, more desperate, more willing to believe in transformation through drowning. For weeks afterward, you avoid Highway 20. Take the long way around through Anacortes rather than cross the bridge. But you dream about it every night. Dream about standing on that barrier, about the maiden's webbed hands reaching up for you, about the peace that comes with letting go. You dream about the cold water closing over your head, about your lungs filling with salt and darkness, about your body sinking down to join the others in whatever garden of the drowned exists beneath that bridge. You dream about barnacles growing on your skin and your hair turning to kelp and your teeth becoming sharp. And worst of all, you dream about how good it feels, how right, how much like finally coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Your co-workers notice you're different. You move slower now, as if the air is thicker than it should be. You drink water constantly, but never feel satisfied, like your body is trying to replace blood with brine. On hot days, you find yourself drawn to the ocean, to lakes, to any body of water large enough to submerge yourself in. You've stopped showering, baths only now, and you lie in the tub for hours, eyes closed, humming a melody you don't remember learning. Sometimes you wake up on your bathroom floor, soaking wet, with no memory of how you got there or how long you've been lying in the cold water. Your skin has taken on a permanent greenish tint that no doctor can explain. And every night, without fail, you hear the singing. It comes through your walls, through your windows, through the very bones of your house. The maiden is calling you back, and part of you, a larger part, every day, wants to answer, wants to get in your car and drive north to that bridge, wants to climb onto that barrier one more time, wants to lean forward and finally let the water have what it's been asking for since the moment you heard that first note. You tell yourself you won't go. You tell yourself you're stronger than whatever spell she's woven. But you've started sleeping in your car. And sometimes you wake up miles from home, always driving north, always heading toward Deception Pass, toward the bridge where the maiden waits beneath 180 feet of churning water. One of these nights, you won't wake up in time to turn around. One of these nights, you'll make it all the way to the bridge, and you'll hear that singing again. And this time, there won't be a truck driver to break the spell. This time you'll join the 426 others who chose the water over the world, who chose drowning over living. And when you do, when you finally let yourself fall, Kokwalalwut will be there to welcome you home, to guide your transformation, to add your voice to the eternal song that lures travelers to the edge of Deception Pass. Because that's what the bridge does. That's what it's always done. It offers a choice between two kinds of death, The slow death of ordinary life, or the quick death that promises to turn you into something else, something beautiful, something that belongs to the maiden and the deep. The couple had been driving for 6 hours straight when they finally turned onto Highway 101, following the winding road that hugged the southern shore of Lake Crescent. It was nearly 11 at night. Later than they'd planned, but the wedding in Port Townsend had run long, and the traffic getting out of Seattle had been brutal. The woman navigated while her partner drove, both of them exhausted but determined to make it to their cabin rental near Solduke Hot Springs before midnight. The lake stretched out beside them, impossibly dark and still, reflecting nothing of the clouded sky above. They'd been arguing on and off for the last hour, the kind of low-grade bickering that happens when two people are tired and hungry and have spent too many consecutive hours in a confined space. Nothing serious. Disagreements about which restaurant to stop at, whose turn it was to check the GPS, whether they should have just stayed in Port Angeles instead of pushing through to the cabin. But the tension sat between them like a third passenger, making the car feel smaller, the darkness outside more oppressive. The woman suggested they pull over at Lake Crescent Lodge, maybe grab coffee or stretch their legs, but the man shook his head. The lodge would be closed this late. Better to just power through. That's when they saw her. She was walking along the shoulder of the road, maybe 50 yards ahead, moving in the same direction they were traveling. At first glance, she looked like any other pedestrian, but as their headlights swept over her, details emerged that made the woman grip the dashboard. The figure wore a long dress, something from another era, the fabric clinging to her body as if soaking wet despite the clear night. Her hair hung in dark, dripping strands down her back. She walked with a strange, purposeful gait, each step deliberate but somehow wrong, as if she'd forgotten how joints were supposed to bend. The man slowed the car instinctively. Should we stop? See if she needs help? His voice carried uncertainty, the words of someone asking a question he already knew the answer to, but hoped he was wrong about. The woman didn't answer immediately. She was staring at the figure, watching the way the dress moved in the still air, watching the way the woman's bare feet seemed to glide over the asphalt rather than make contact with it. When the figure turned her head to look at them, slowly, too slowly, like a door swinging on rusty hinges, the woman heard herself whisper, "Keep driving." But the man had already stopped, already rolled down his window. The cold that poured in wasn't the crisp autumn chill of the Olympic Peninsula. It was the bone-deep cold of deep water, of places where sunlight never reaches, where pressure crushes and preserves and transforms. The figure approached the passenger side window, and the woman found herself face to face with something that had been human once, but had spent too long becoming something else. The flesh was waxy, pale as ivory soap, with an unnatural sheen that made it look almost translucent. Where parts of the face should have been, there were only smooth gaps, as if the features had been scooped away. But the eyes remained, and they were looking directly at the woman with an expression of such profound sadness that it made her chest ache. He said he loved me. The voice came from the figure, but didn't seem to originate from her mouth. It sounded waterlogged, thick, like words spoken through a mouthful of liquid. He wrapped me in blankets. He tied the rope so tight. He rowed me out to the deep water where it's always cold, always dark. He said he loved me. Water began to pour from the figure's mouth, not in a trickle, but in a steady stream, splashing onto the road with a sound that was far too loud in the surrounding silence. The smell hit them then. Lake water, but underneath it, something chemical, something alkaline, the sharp scent of minerals and decay and soap. The man fumbled for the gear shift, his hands shaking so badly he knocked it into neutral instead of drive. The figure reached out toward the woman's window, and they both saw that her hand was wrong. The flesh had the consistency of soft wax, moldable, unnatural. Barnacles had begun to grow on the wrist, and between the fingers were delicate webs of tissue that belonged to something aquatic. When she pressed her palm against the glass, it left a print, not of oil from skin, but of something greasy and thick that immediately began to crystallize in the cold. The woman could see handprints now all over the exterior of the car, dozens of them, as if the figure had been circling the vehicle while they were stopped, marking it, claiming it. "Drive," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then louder, "Drive. Drive now. Drive." The man finally got the car into gear and pressed the accelerator. But the figure moved with them, keeping pace alongside the passenger window even as their speed increased to 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. She shouldn't have been able to keep up. No human could run that fast. But she wasn't human anymore. Hadn't been since December 1937, when her husband Monty had beaten and strangled her in their apartment. When he'd wrapped her body in blankets and driven to this very spot. When he'd rowed her out into the 624-foot deep lake and dropped her into water so cold it stopped decomposition, so mineral-rich it had turned her flesh to soap over the course of 3 years. The figure finally fell behind as they hit 60 miles per hour. But in the rearview mirror, they could see her still standing in the middle of the road, still dripping water that pooled around her bare feet, still watching. The man's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The woman realized she'd been holding her breath and released it in a shuddering gasp that fogged the window. The window that was still covered in that greasy handprint, the one that was starting to eat through the glass, leaving an etched outline of fingers that would never, could never be removed. They drove for another 10 minutes in silence before the man pulled into a rest area, hands still shaking. "What the hell was that?" he asked, though the question wasn't really meant to be answered. The woman had pulled out her phone, searching for anything, any explanation. That's when she found the story. "The Lady of the Lake," she read aloud, her voice unsteady. "In 1940, fishermen found the body of a woman floating in Lake Crescent. She'd been wrapped in blankets and tied with rope. The cold water and minerals had turned her flesh to soap through a process called saponification. They identified her as Hallie Latham, who disappeared in 1937. Her husband murdered her and dumped her body in the lake." The man looked at the handprint on the passenger window, at the way it had started to spread like frost, covering more and more of the glass. "That's just a story, a legend. It can't be." But his protest died as they both noticed the water. It was pooling in the passenger side footwell, clear and impossibly cold. And it was rising. The woman lifted her feet, watching in horror as lake water filled the car from some impossible source, bringing with it that same alkaline smell, that same sense of deep cold and crushing pressure. The doors wouldn't open, the windows wouldn't roll down. They were sealed in with the rising water, and in the rearview mirror, reflected in the glass, they could see her walking toward them down the empty highway. "He said he loved me," the voice echoed through the car, though the figure was still 50 yards away. "He wrapped me in blankets. He said it would be quick. But the water was so cold I couldn't die properly. So cold I turned to soap instead of dust. So cold I'm still here, still waiting, still looking for him to come back and explain why love means drowning." The water had reached their knees now, shockingly cold, and they could feel their legs beginning to numb. The man tried the door again, throwing his shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. The car had become a sealed chamber, a tomb, filling with lake water at an impossible rate. Through the water now reaching their waists, the woman saw something that made her scream. There were others, not just the figure approaching on the road, but dozens more rising from the trees, from the shadows, from the lake itself. All of them dripping, all of them with that same waxy, soap-like flesh, all of them wrapped in the remnants of blankets and rope, all of them victims of Lake Crescent's unique preservation. How many people had drowned here? How many bodies had been dumped in the deep water? How many had been transformed by the cold and the minerals into something that couldn't rest, couldn't decay, couldn't move on? The figure reached their car and pressed her face against the driver's side window. Up close, they could see where pieces of her were missing. Not eaten away, but scooped out, as if someone had taken a spoon to soft soap. They could see the rope marks around her neck, the depression in her skull where she'd been struck. They could see that her eyes, though preserved, held no life. Only that infinite sadness, that eternal question of why love had led to this, to cold water and rope and the slow transformation from human to something else. "Get out!" the woman screamed at her partner. "We have to get out now." She managed to force her door open, the water pouring out in a rush, and they tumbled onto the pavement, soaking wet despite having never touched the lake itself. The car sat empty behind them, completely dry inside, no trace of the water that had been filling it moments before. But their clothes were drenched, and when the woman touched her face, her hand came away covered in that greasy film, the same substance that coated the window. The smell wouldn't leave her nostrils. Minerals and cold and soap. They ran, not back toward the road, but into the forest, crashing through underbrush in blind panic. Behind them, they could hear wet footsteps following, could hear the dripping, could hear that voice repeating its litany. He said he loved me. He wrapped me in blankets. He said he loved me. The trees were too thick, the darkness too complete. And soon they were lost, turned around, with no idea which direction led back to the highway. The man tried his phone, but there was no signal. Had never been signal, not really. Not in this part of the peninsula where the forest grows so dense it swallows technology whole. They stumbled into a clearing and stopped, breathing hard, listening. The footsteps had stopped. The dripping had stopped. Even the normal sounds of the forest, insects, small animals, wind through leaves, had ceased. In the center of the clearing, illuminated by moonlight that seemed far too bright, stood a rowboat. It was ancient, the wood swollen and rotted, but it sat upright as if recently placed there. Inside were blankets and rope. And when the woman approached, drawn by some horrible compulsion she couldn't name, she saw that the blankets were stained with something dark and old, and the rope still held the shape of a body, still bore the impression of someone bound and weighted and drowned. "He rowed me out to the deep water." The voice came from everywhere now, from the trees and the sky and the ground beneath their feet. "Right here, this spot." He said it would be quick, but the lake keeps what it takes. The cold preserves us, the minerals transform us, and we wait. We wait for the ones who fight, the ones who hurt each other, the ones who think love means violence. We wait and we watch and we remember what it feels like to be wrapped in blankets and dropped into darkness. The couple looked at each other, and in that moment they both remembered every harsh word, every escalating argument, every time one of them had thought about leaving, but stayed anyway. They remembered the fight that had happened just an hour ago, the way his hand had moved without thinking, the way her voice had gone cold and sharp. They remembered all the little deaths that happen in a relationship, all the small drownings. And standing there in the clearing with that rotted rowboat between them, they understood why the Lady of the Lake had chosen them, why she'd appeared on this particular road on this particular night. Because they were moving toward the same ending she'd found. Just slower, just in increments, instead of all at once. The figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, water still pouring from her mouth, hands still reaching. "The lake is so cold," she whispered. "So cold you turn to soap instead of disappearing. So cold you stay forever. Would you like to see? Would you like to know what it feels like to be preserved, to be transformed, to become something that can never leave?" She took a step forward, and the ground beneath her feet turned dark with water. Another step, and the water spread further, pooling around the rowboat, beginning to fill the clearing. One more step, and they would be swimming, drowning, sinking into depths that shouldn't exist in a forest clearing miles from shore. They ran again, this time finding the road through sheer luck, or perhaps because the Lady of the Lake wanted them to find it, wanted them to escape so they could carry her story forward. They reached their car, still sitting in the rest area, still bearing that handprint on the window, and drove the remaining miles to their cabin in hysterical silence. They didn't speak that night, didn't unpack, didn't touch. They sat on opposite sides of the room until dawn, watching each other across the distance, wondering if every couple was just one bad fight away from becoming another Lake Crescent legend, another body wrapped in blankets and dropped into cold water, another ghost walking the highway, looking for someone to understand what love had cost. In the morning, they drove back to Seattle without stopping. They didn't talk about what they'd seen, didn't report it, didn't try to explain. But the handprint remained on the passenger window, eating slowly through the glass, spreading a little more each day. And every time either of them washed their hands, the water ran cold and smelled of minerals and soap. And for just a moment, they could feel what it was like to be at the bottom of a 24-foot-deep lake, where the cold stops time and the minerals change everything, and love is just another word for drowning. You make a wrong turn somewhere between Woodinville and Bothell, one of those decisions that seems insignificant at the time, but changes everything that comes after. The GPS lost signal 3 miles back, and your phone shows you're on Paradise Valley Road, but the street signs don't match what the screen displays. It's been a long day. 12 hours at the office, another pointless meeting about quarterly projections, the kind of corporate monotony that makes you forget you're alive. All you want is to get home, pour a drink, and stop thinking for a few hours. But the road you're on keeps twisting in ways that don't feel right. And when you check your odometer, you've somehow driven 8 miles in what should have been a 3-mile stretch. That's when you see the sign, a hand-painted warning nailed to a fence post that reads, "Demon's Hill, do not stop." The paint is old, flaking, the kind of amateur work that teenagers do when they're trying to scare each other or mark territory. You slow down despite the warning, because ahead, the road dips into what looks like a shallow valley, then rises again on the other side. Nothing remarkable. Just a dip in the road like thousands of others across Washington state. You shift down a gear as you descend, expecting to need the extra power to climb back up the other side. But as you reach the bottom of the dip, something changes. Your car shudders once, twice, like it's driven over railroad tracks that don't exist. You check your mirrors. Empty road behind you, empty road ahead. The shudder comes again, and this time your steering wheel jerks in your hands, pulling to the right even though you're holding it straight. The car begins to slow despite your foot still being on the gas. You press the accelerator harder and the engine responds, RPMs climbing, but your speed continues to decrease. 60 miles per hour, 50, 40. The car is fighting against something, struggling like it's driving through invisible mud. At 30 miles per hour, you shift into neutral to check if the transmission is failing. That's when physics stops making sense. The car doesn't coast to a stop. Instead, it begins to accelerate. You're rolling uphill. You can see the grade of the road rising ahead of you, can feel the way the horizon tilts. But your speedometer is climbing. 35, 40, 45. You're not touching the gas. The engine is idling in neutral. But you're going faster and faster up a slope that should be impossible to climb without power. You hit the brakes. Nothing happens. The pedal goes to the floor with no resistance, as if the brake line has been cut, though you know it hasn't because the car was fine 10 minutes ago. 50 miles per hour now, still accelerating, still climbing uphill. Your heart hammers in your chest as you yank the emergency brake. It makes the ratcheting sound, engages with a click you can feel, but the car doesn't slow. If anything, you're moving faster. 55, 60. The road ahead should be cresting soon, should level out or start descending. But it keeps rising, the angle getting steeper, and you're climbing it at speeds that make your hands sweat on the wheel even though you're not steering, not accelerating, not doing anything except watching helplessly as some force you can't see pulls you upward. That's when you notice the other cars. They're parked along the shoulder at the top of the hill, maybe 6 or 7 of them, scattered at odd angles like they've been abandoned in a hurry. As you get closer, 65 miles per hour now, impossibly fast for a car in neutral with the brakes engaged. You can see people standing beside the vehicles. They're not moving. They're just standing there, staring at their cars with expressions you recognize even from a distance. Confusion bleeding into fear, bleeding into something worse. Something that looks like acceptance. Your car crests the hill, and you expect it to finally stop, to slow down, to obey some law of physics. But the hill doesn't end. The road keeps climbing. You're looking at what should be level ground, but your eyes insist is an incline, and your car continues to accelerate up this impossible slope. 70 miles per hour. The speedometer needle quivers as it climbs higher. You try throwing the car into park while it's moving, something you know you should never do. But you're desperate. The transmission makes a grinding sound that rattles your teeth. But nothing changes. You're still climbing, still accelerating. You pass one of the parked cars and get a better look at the driver standing beside it. He's in a business suit, tie loosened, and he's staring at you with eyes that have seen too much. His lips are moving, but you can't hear what he's saying. In your rearview mirror, you see him turn and start walking back toward his car, but his movements are wrong. Each step takes him forward, but also somehow backward, like he's walking on a treadmill that's moving in 2 directions at once. You blink and he's in a different position, several yards away from where he was a second ago. Blink again, and he's back at his car, reaching for the door handle, repeating the same motion you saw him make minutes ago. The dashboard lights begin to flicker. Your radio turns on by itself, cycling through stations so fast it sounds like a zipper being pulled. Fragments of voices, music, static, all blending into white noise. Then it stops on a frequency that shouldn't exist, somewhere between stations, and you hear children laughing. The sound is wrong, distorted, like it's being played backward and forward simultaneously. The laughter echoes inside your car, even though you're alone. and when you look in your rearview mirror, the back seat isn't empty anymore. There are handprints on the windows, dozens of them. Small hands pressing against the glass from the outside. From the inside. From somewhere that's both and neither. 80 miles per hour. The needle is buried in the red zone, past speeds your car shouldn't be capable of. And you're still climbing this hill that has no summit, this road that keeps rising into a sky that looks darker than it should for 7 p.m. on a clear evening. You try to steer toward the shoulder, to force the car off the road, but the wheel won't turn. It's locked in position, or maybe the road itself is locked, refusing to let you deviate from this path. Through the windshield, you can see something ahead, a structure dark and looming, getting closer much faster than it should be. As you approach, you realize it's not getting closer. You're being pulled toward it. The building is old, a barn or warehouse, its walls covered in graffiti and broken windows that reflect nothing, not even your headlights. The road leads directly to it, or through it, or into it. You can't tell which because your depth perception has stopped working, your eyes unable to process the distance between you and the structure. It could be 100 yards away or 10 feet. Both feel true. That's when your speed begins to drop. 70, 60. Not because you're braking, you gave up on that. But because you're approaching whatever this place is, whatever force has been pulling you upward. The car slows to 50, 40, 30, and finally rolls to a stop exactly 10 feet from the barn's entrance. An opening that should have a door but doesn't, just darkness that seems to pulse with its own rhythm. You sit in the driver's seat, hands still gripping the wheel, and realize you've been holding your breath for the last minute. When you finally inhale, the air tastes wrong. Metallic and sweet, like ozone and copper and something organic rotting. You look in your mirrors and see the other drivers have all turned to face your car. They're standing in a line now, though you never saw them move into formation. Their eyes reflect your taillights red, like animals caught in a spotlight. One of them, a woman in a business casual outfit that looks weeks old, raises her hand and points at the barn. The gesture is mechanical, puppet-like, and all the other drivers copy her in perfect synchronization. They're pointing at the barn, at you, at something behind you. You turn back to face forward, and someone is standing at your driver's side window. A child, maybe 8 years old, wearing clothes from a different era, 1980s style, all neon and oversized patterns. The child's hand is pressed against your window, palm flat, and you can see through it. Not transparent, not ghostly, but literally through it, like looking through water or distorted glass. The child's mouth moves, and you hear the voice inside your head rather than through your ears. You have to get out. You have to walk into the barn. That's where the hill goes. That's where everyone goes. Your door opens before you touch the handle. You don't remember unlocking it. You don't remember the child opening it. But it's open. And the child is gone, and you're stepping out onto asphalt that feels soft under your feet. Like it's not quite solid. Like you're stepping on the surface of a liquid that only pretends to be concrete. The other drivers are walking toward you now, that same mechanical walk, and you realize they're not trying to reach you. They're trying to reach your car. They need it. They're trapped here without it, stuck in this loop on this hill that doesn't end. And your car is new, fresh, still connected to the real world in ways theirs no longer are. You run toward the barn because it's the only direction that makes sense in this place where nothing makes sense. As you cross the threshold into the darkness, you hear your car start behind you. Someone, one of those mechanical drivers, has taken your place. You hear the engine rev, hear the tires squeal, hear the sound of acceleration that shouldn't be possible for a car in neutral. You turn back to look and see your car climbing again, moving backward down the hill you climbed up, the hill that looked like up but must have been down, or maybe both. Maybe this place has decided that up and down are the same direction. Inside the barn, it's not dark. That's the first thing you realize. It looks dark from the outside, but inside there's light coming from everywhere and nowhere, illuminating a space that's too large, that extends further than the barn's exterior walls should allow. And it's full of people, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all standing in neat rows like an audience waiting for a show to start. They're not looking at you. They're looking up at something above them, above you. And when you follow their gaze, you see the road, the same road you were just on. Except it's overhead now, running across the ceiling like a highway in the sky, and cars are driving on it. Your car is there, being driven by one of those mechanical drivers, and it's accelerating upward, or is it downward, toward another barn that sits at the top, or bottom, of the impossible hill. One of the standing figures turns to look at you. Their face is neutral, empty, waiting. "How long have you been here?" you ask, though your voice sounds strange, echoey, like you're speaking in a cathedral. The figure doesn't answer with words. Instead, they hold up their phone and show you the screen. The date reads the same day you started driving, the same day it is now. But the time has been counting for 72 hours, 3 days compressed into the 15 minutes you spent climbing the hill. Or maybe 15 minutes stretched into 3 days, or maybe time here doesn't work the way it's supposed to work anywhere else. "You can leave," another voice says. And you turn to see a man in a security guard uniform that looks ancient, decades old. You can walk back out, find the road again, try to drive away. But you'll end up here again. Everyone ends up here again. This hill doesn't let go. It just keeps pulling, keeps climbing, keeps forcing cars upward until they break down or run out of gas, or the drivers abandon them and come here to wait. His voice is matter of fact, resigned, like he's explained this 1,000 times to 1,000 drivers who refuse to believe it. You look back at the entrance you came through. It's still there, still open, still showing that impossible road under an impossible sky. You could leave. You could try. But watching your car on that overhead highway, seeing it climb and climb without ever reaching a destination, you understand what this place is. It's not a haunted hill. It's not an optical illusion. It's a loop, a trap, a place where the laws governing motion and gravity and time have collapsed into something new, something that pulls everything inward and upward and never lets go. The teenagers who called it Demon's Hill were wrong. There's no demon. Just physics breaking down, reality malfunctioning, and every driver who made a wrong turn onto Paradise Valley Road when the GPS wasn't working, and the signs didn't match, and the hills started pulling instead of pushing. You find a spot among the waiting figures and sit down on the floor that isn't quite solid. Above you, your car continues to climb, driven by someone who was here before you, who took your place, who's now trapped in the same acceleration you just escaped. And somewhere outside, on some other road in some other part of Seattle, another driver is making a wrong turn, another GPS is losing signal, another sign for Demon's Hill is coming into view. The cycle continues. The hill keeps pulling, and the barn keeps filling with people who made one small mistake and found themselves climbing towards something that has no ending, only an eternal middle where cars roll uphill and time counts wrong, and the only escape is to abandon your vehicle and join the audience watching the highway in the sky. You check your phone. It shows you've been here for 18 seconds. Your watch says 45 minutes. The clock on the barn wall, when did that appear? reads a date from 6 months in the future. All three are true. All three are lies. Welcome to Demon's Hill, where gravity works backward and time works sideways, and everyone who enters the barn is still driving on that road, still climbing, still waiting for the summit that never comes. The rideshare notification pinged just after 2 a.m., pulling him from the half-doze he'd fallen into while parked outside a 7-Eleven in Auburn. Friday night was winding down, most of the bar crowd already home, and he'd been debating calling it and heading back to his apartment in Kent. But the rent was due in 3 days, and he was still $200 short. So when the request came through, pickup on Auburn Black Diamond Road, drop-off in Black Diamond proper, he accepted it, despite the bad feeling that settled in his stomach the moment he saw the location. Auburn Black Diamond Road wasn't a place people requested rides at 2 a.m. It was rural, winding through old mining country where streetlights gave up after the first mile, and cell service became spotty at best. The few houses out there sat far back from the road, their driveways marked by mailboxes that had seen better decades. He'd driven this route maybe twice before, always during the day, and both times had been unnerved by how empty it felt, like the land itself remembered the men who died in the mines and couldn't quite move past it. But a fare was a fare, and the app showed it was a 20-minute drive, plus whatever the passenger was paying to get to Black Diamond. Easy money if he didn't think too hard about it. He pulled out of the 7-Eleven parking lot and headed south, watching Auburn's scattered businesses give way to darkness. The road narrowed as he drove, trees pressing in from both sides, their branches forming a canopy that blocked what little moonlight made it through the clouds. His GPS showed the pickup point as a spot on the road with no visible landmarks, no buildings, nothing that would explain why someone would be standing there in the middle of the night. He slowed as he approached, checking the app to make sure he had the right location. The pin sat exactly where a figure stood on the shoulder, illuminated by his headlights. She was wearing a wedding dress. That was the first thing he noticed, the white fabric almost glowing in the darkness, and for a moment he thought about driving past, pretending he hadn't seen her, claiming the GPS had malfunctioned. But she'd already turned toward his car, already raised a hand in acknowledgement, and canceling now would tank his rating. He pulled over and unlocked the doors, watching in his rearview mirror as she approached the back passenger side. The dress was old-fashioned, the kind with long sleeves and a high collar and layers of fabric that rustled as she moved. It was also filthy. The hem was black with dirt and what looked like coal dust, and the entire garment was torn in places, exposing skin underneath. She opened the door and slid into the back seat with practiced ease, bringing with her the smell of earth and smoke and something chemical he couldn't quite identify. When she met his eyes in the rearview mirror, he saw she was young, mid-20s maybe, and would have been beautiful if not for the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "Black Diamond?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She nodded once, sharp and precise, and he put the car in drive. The app showed the trip would take 12 minutes. He'd driven for rideshare companies for 3 years and had learned not to ask questions, especially not at 2 a.m. when the passengers tended to be drunk or high or running from something. But the silence that filled the car as they drove was oppressive, heavy with things unsaid, and after 5 minutes, he couldn't take it anymore. "Wedding run late?" he asked, aiming for casual conversation. He didn't show up. Her voice was surprisingly clear, though it carried an accent he couldn't place. European, maybe, something Eastern. "I waited at the church for 3 hours. Everyone left. The priest, the guests, my family. Everyone except me. I kept thinking he'd come, that there was a reason, that he wouldn't just abandon me. But then I heard about the mine. She paused, and in the rear-view mirror, he saw her hands clutching the bouquet he hadn't noticed before. The flowers were dead, dried to brown husks, and they crumbled slightly under her grip. The mine? He shouldn't engage. Every instinct told him to drive in silence, complete the trip, collect the fare. But the way she said it, the mine, like there was only one that mattered, made him look at her again. In the mirror, her reflection seemed wrong somehow. Too pale, too still, like a photograph instead of a living person. "What mine?" he heard himself ask. "The Lawson mine," she said, and something in her voice made his hands tighten on the steering wheel. November 6th, 1910. They told me there was an explosion, 16 men dead. 5 of them never recovered, trapped under the cave-in. He was supposed to be my husband by then. We were supposed to be married that morning. But he wanted to work one more shift, wanted the extra money for our honeymoon. He said he'd come straight from the mine to the church, wouldn't even stop to clean up. But the explosion happened at 2 p.m., and by the time I ran to the mine shaft, they'd already sealed it off. They couldn't get the bodies out. Too dangerous, they said. The whole thing could come down. The driver's mouth had gone dry. He knew about the Lawson mine disaster. It was local history, the kind of thing they taught in King County schools. But that had been 1910, over 100 years ago. The woman in his back seat couldn't be more than 25. That's a long time ago, he managed. "You must mean your great-grandfather or something." "I mean my fiancé," she said. And when he glanced in the mirror again, her eyes were locked on his. "I mean the man I was supposed to marry. I mean Julius Person. He was 30 years old, Italian. We'd met at a church social 2 years before. He made me laugh. He promised me a house in Seattle once he saved enough money. He promised me children and a garden, and Sunday dinners with his family. He promised me forever." Her voice had taken on a dreamy quality, like she was reciting a story she'd told too many times. But forever lasted 4 hours, from when he left for his shift to when the mountain took him back. The driver's hands were shaking now. Julius Person. He knew that name. It had been on the memorial at the Black Diamond Cemetery, one of the 16 men killed in the Lawson explosion. He'd seen it during a historical walking tour his daughter's class had taken last spring, had stood with the other parents reading the names while the teacher explained about the mining disasters, about how dangerous the work had been, about the immigrants who'd come from across the world to dig coal out of Washington mountains. "That was 1910, he repeated, because what else could he say? That was over a century ago. "I've been waiting," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "They buried an empty casket for him, said prayers over nothing but dirt and maybe a few fragments of bone. But he's still down there, still in the mine. I can feel him. Every night I walk to the shaft, what's left of it, and I call his name. Sometimes I think I hear him calling back. He must be so cold down there, so dark. He must be wondering why I never came for him." Her hands were moving over the dead bouquet now, picking at the dried petals, letting them fall onto the floor of his car. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice cracked. "Ma'am, I don't know what's going on, but..." He looked in the rearview mirror, and the back seat was empty, completely empty. No woman in a wedding dress, no dead flowers, no coal-stained fabric or chemical smell. Just empty seats and the darkness of auburn black diamond road stretching behind him. He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop on the shoulder, and turned around to look directly at the back seat. Nothing. She was gone. He sat there for a full minute, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. His phone chimed. The app showing the ride had been canceled, no explanation given. But there was a message in the trip notes. "Thank you for taking me home. Julius is still waiting. Tell them we're both still waiting." He read it 3 times before his hands stopped shaking enough to put the car back in drive. As he pulled back onto the road, something made him look at the passenger seat. The bouquet was there. The dead brown flowers she'd been holding, real as anything he'd ever touched. He reached out slowly and picked it up, feeling the brittle stems crack under his fingers. And beneath the flowers, pressed into his seat cushion, was a handprint, black with coal dust, small and delicate. And when he touched it, the residue felt damp, as if the hand that made it had been wet with something. He brought his fingers to his nose and nearly gagged. Water. Mineral heavy mine water that had been sitting stagnant for over a century. He drove straight to Black Diamond, not because the app told him to, but because he didn't know what else to do. The town was dark at 2:30 a.m., all the buildings closed, the streets empty. He followed the road until he reached the cemetery, the gates open despite the hour, and parked outside. In the beam of his headlights, he could see the memorial. 16 names carved into granite, a monument to the men who died in the Lawson mine. Julius Person was third from the top, age 30, Italian nationality, married, 1 child. But he hadn't been married. The woman had said he was her fiancé, that they were supposed to be married that morning, which meant the memorial was wrong, or time had been rewritten, or he didn't know what it meant. He got out of the car, still holding the dead bouquet, and walked to the monument. At its base, someone had left offerings. Coins, small stones, photographs gone yellow with age. And there, among them, was another bouquet. Identical to the one he was holding, just as dead, just as covered in coal dust. "She comes here every night," a voice said behind him. And he spun around to find an old man standing at the cemetery entrance. The man wore a heavy coat despite the mild temperature and carried a flashlight that he didn't bother turning on. "Been coming for 100 years, though most folks can't see her anymore. You must have what my grandmother called the sight, the ability to see what's stuck between." The old man walked closer, his footsteps making no sound on the gravel path. Her name was Sophia. She never married after Julius died. Spent her whole life waiting for him to come back from that mine. She died in 1963, 53 years after the explosion, and they buried her in Seattle where her family was. But she comes back here, looking for him. The driver's legs felt weak. "That's not possible. I had her in my car. She was real. She talked to me." "She was real," the old man agreed. "Still is, in her way. The mine never gave those 16 men back. The families had to bury empty caskets. You know what that does to the ones left behind? The not knowing, the imagining them trapped and suffocating in the dark. It breaks something. And sometimes that broken thing doesn't heal, not even after death." He gestured at the memorial. 5 of them were never recovered. Still down there, crushed under rock and coal. Julius Persine, Frank Gardini, Isidore Gardini, Dom Gregoire, Albert Fontana. Their bodies became part of the mountain. And the people who loved them, some of them couldn't let go. "Why did she get in my car?" The question came out as a whisper. "Because you were there," the old man said simply. "Because the road you were driving goes right over the old mine shaft. Because November 6th is coming up again. It always comes up again. And she gets more solid when the anniversary approaches. She's looking for someone to tell. someone to remember, someone to understand that love doesn't stop just because the earth swallows what you love. He turned to leave, then paused. Keep the flowers. She left them for you on purpose. She wants you to put them on the memorial. It's the only grave she has for him. The old man walked away, fading into the darkness between the headstones, and the driver was alone again. He looked down at the bouquet in his hands, at the coal dust staining his fingers, and slowly placed it at the base of the memorial next to its twin. When he stood up, he could have sworn he heard something. A voice, female, saying, "Thank you," from somewhere very far away, or possibly very close. He couldn't tell which. He got back in his car and drove home, the coal dust handprint still visible on his passenger seat. He tried to clean it the next morning with upholstery cleaner, then water, then professional detailing. But the handprint wouldn't come off. It had seeped into the fabric, become part of it. A permanent reminder of the night he'd driven a dead woman home to look for her dead fiancé in a mine that had been sealed for over a century. He stopped accepting ride requests on Auburn Black Diamond Road after that. Let his rating take the hit. Let other drivers wonder why that stretch of pavement earned automatic declines. Because he knew now that some roads don't just connect places, they connect times, connect the living to the dead, connect those who can't stop searching to those who are doomed to be searched for. And every November, when the anniversary of the Lawson mine disaster rolled around, he'd drive out to Black Diamond Cemetery on his own and leave a fresh bouquet at the memorial. White roses, just like the ones Sophia had carried, just like the ones she'd been carrying for 100 years, waiting for a wedding that would never happen, and a groom who was still down there in the dark, still waiting for someone to bring him home. You shouldn't be on the motorcycle this late. Shouldn't be threading through I-5 traffic at midnight on a Tuesday, when exhaustion is making your reflexes slow and your judgment questionable. But the overtime shift at the Boeing plant in Renton ran until 11, and the bus route from there to your apartment in Northgate takes 90 minutes with 2 transfers. And you're tired in a way that goes beyond physical. The kind of bone-deep weariness that makes you take risks you'd normally avoid. So you're on the bike, lane splitting when traffic allows, pushing 70 in the light post-midnight flow, just trying to get home. The highway feels different at this hour. During the day, I-5 through Seattle is a parking lot, a crawling nightmare of brake lights and merging lanes and drivers on their phones. But after midnight, it opens up, becomes almost meditative. Just you and the occasional semi and the sodium lights painting everything the color of old photographs. You've made this run 100 times, know every exit and on-ramp, every place where the pavement buckles or the drainage creates standing water. The route from Renton to Northgate is burned into your muscle memory. 45 minutes door to door if traffic cooperates. You're passing the Boeing Field exit when you first notice the car in your mirrors. It's an old Pontiac, maybe from the 70s. The kind with chrome bumpers and a body style that hasn't been on the road in decades. The paint looks primer gray in the sodium lights, and it's pacing you exactly. When you accelerate, it accelerates. When you ease off, it matches your speed. At first, you think it's just coincidence, just another late-night driver heading north. But there's something off about the way it moves. The way it holds its position 3 car lengths back without ever varying the distance. You twist the throttle and the bike surges forward, the engine's growl echoing off the concrete barriers. 80 miles per hour. 90. The Pontiac keeps pace. Impossible. Those old boats couldn't do 90 even when they were new, and this one looks like it's held together with rust and prayer. You check your mirrors again and realize you can see through the windshield to where the driver should be. But the silhouette behind the wheel is wrong. Too still. Too thin. The head turns to look at you, and you catch a glimpse of what might be a face. But it's all wrong. Too dark. Too hollow. Like looking at a skull wearing skin that doesn't quite fit. You take the next exit without signaling, a last-second decision that has you leaning hard into the curve, and for a moment, you think you've lost it. But as you're decelerating down the off-ramp toward Spokane Street, your headlight catches something in the darkness ahead. The Pontiac. It's already at the bottom of the ramp, waiting, even though there's no way it could have passed you. You slam on the brakes, the bike's ABS pulsing under your fingers, and you come to a stop, 20 feet from the car. The driver's door is open. There's no one inside. Then you're moving again, without meaning to, without making the conscious decision to twist the throttle. But the bike is accelerating, is pulling you back onto I-5. And when you look down at your hands, they're frozen on the controls, locked in position. The speedometer needle climbs past 60, 70, 80, and you're merging back onto the highway, even though every instinct is screaming at you to stop, to get off the bike, to run. That's when you see them. Not just the Pontiac anymore. There are others now. A 1950s Chevrolet with massive fins, and a front end crumpled like it's hit a wall at high speed. A 1960s Mustang with no windshield, the glass blown out or maybe never there. The interior visible and dark. A 1980s minivan with the side caved in, metal twisted and torn. They're all around you now, forming a convoy, and you're in the middle of them, and they're all going the same speed, 95 miles per hour north on I-5, and none of you are slowing down. You try the next exit, 145th Street. But as you lean into the lane change, the minivan cuts you off, forcing you back into formation. You try again at 175th, and the Mustang boxes you in on the other side. They're not letting you leave? The realization hits like cold water. You're not riding with them. You're being herded, guided, kept in the pack like a wolf that's found prey. Your odometer is spinning. You glanced at it a mile back and it read 47,382. Now it shows 47,489. But you've only traveled maybe 4 miles since getting back on I-5. The numbers keep climbing. 47,500, 47,520, 47,550. Counting miles you're not actually covering, tracking distance in some other dimension where the road goes further than it should, where Seattle never ends and I-5 stretches on forever. The highway around you is changing. You're passing landmarks you recognize, the Northgate Mall exit, the Aurora Bridge, the view of the Ship Canal. But they're wrong somehow. Buildings that should be there aren't. Neighborhoods that were torn down in the 1960s for freeway construction are visible in the gaps between the concrete barriers, houses and shops and streets that exist in some parallel version of Seattle, where I-5 was never built, where the Cascade neighborhood wasn't demolished, where 8,000 people weren't displaced to make room for this highway. Through the missing windshield of the Mustang, you can see the driver now. They're young, maybe early 20s, and they're screaming. Their mouth is open in an endless silent howl, and their hands are locked on a steering wheel that's no longer connected to anything. And they're covered in blood that looks black in the sodium lights. They've been screaming for decades, you realize. Since whenever their accident happened, since the moment they lost control and hit the barrier and died on this stretch of highway. They've been driving and screaming and unable to stop. The Pontiac pulls alongside you, and now you can see its driver clearly. It's an old man in a business suit from the 1970s, and his head is twisted at an angle that necks don't bend. And when he turns to look at you, his eyes are empty sockets. His jaw moves, and you can't hear him over the wind and engine noise, but you can read his lips. Welcome to the freeway. Welcome home. Welcome to forever. 100 miles per hour now. 110. The bike's engine is screaming, redlining, but your hands won't ease off the throttle. The convoy is accelerating and you're accelerating with it. All of you racing north on a highway that should have exits but doesn't. Should have end, but won't. You pass the North Gate exit. Your exit, the one that leads to your apartment and your bed and the life you were trying to get back to. And you scream in frustration and fear. But the sound is torn away by the wind. That's when you notice the barriers. The concrete dividers separating northbound from southbound traffic are getting closer, angling inward, funneling all 6 lanes into a narrowing chute. The ghost cars are forcing you toward the center, toward a specific section of barrier that looks newer than the rest, where the concrete is a slightly different color, like it's been repaired recently. Or many times. Often. The Pontiac cuts hard to the right, forcing you toward the barrier. You lean left, but the Mustang is there, blocking you. The minivan accelerates and gets ahead of you, then starts to slow, boxing you in. They're coordinating, working together, and you understand with absolute certainty what they're doing. They're positioning you for the barrier, for the crash, for the moment when you'll lose control and hit the concrete at 115 miles per hour and become one of them. Another ghost. Another driver trapped in the eternal convoy, forever racing north on a highway that never ends. The barrier is right there, 15 feet away, 10, and the bike is sliding toward it despite everything you're doing to fight it. The ghost cars have you locked in, are pushing you with their presence, with the pressure of their speed and mass and hunger. You can see the impact point coming, can see the dark stains on the concrete that might be oil or might be blood, can see where countless other vehicles have hit this exact spot over the decades, making it a thin place, a weak point, somewhere that death has worn the barrier down until it's become a doorway. 5 feet, 3. Your knee is about to touch the concrete, and you know when it does, the bike will go down and you'll be sliding, tumbling, breaking apart. The ghost cars are right beside you now, all of them, forming a wall of vintage metal and broken glass and drivers who died screaming. The Pontiac's driver is smiling now, that skull face grinning with teeth that are too long and too yellow. And he's reaching out through his window towards you, and his hand is just bone wrapped in translucent flesh that still has coal dust under the fingernails. And then, inexplicably, impossibly, your hands unlock. Control comes flooding back in a rush that makes you gasp. And you're steering, you're braking, you're downshifting, and the bike is slowing, and the ghost cars are continuing forward without you. They hit the barrier, one after another. Pontiac, Mustang, minivan, all of them. And they don't crash, don't crumple, don't stop. They pass through the concrete like it's water, like it's nothing, disappearing into wherever ghost cars go when they're not harvesting new drivers for their eternal convoy. You manage to get the bike onto the shoulder, manage to kill the engine, manage to get off and walk on legs that shake so badly you nearly fall. Behind you, I-5 stretches empty in both directions, sodium lights painting everything that sick yellow-orange. No cars visible anywhere. Your watch shows 12:47 a.m. You've been riding for 47 minutes, which means you should be well past Northgate, should be approaching Linwood. But the sign 30 yards ahead reads, "Next exit, Northgate Way." You've gone nowhere, or everywhere. Or you've been driving in circles on a highway that decided to loop back on itself, that decided the convoy needed another member and you were the closest target. When you finally work up the courage to check your odometer, it shows 47,382. The same number it showed when you first noticed the Pontiac. All those miles, all that distance, none of it real, Or all of it real, but in some other direction, some other dimension where I-5 isn't a highway, but a trap, a circuit, an eternal loop for the drivers who died violent deaths on its asphalt. You push the bike the half-mile to the Northgate exit, refusing to ride it, refusing to start the engine. Some instinct tells you that if you get back on while you're still on I-5 proper, still technically on the highway, the convoy will come back. They'll come back, and this time they won't let go. So you walk, pushing 300 pounds of motorcycle uphill on the exit ramp, muscles screaming. But it's better than the alternative. At the top of the ramp, safely on the surface streets, you finally allow yourself to look back at I-5. For just a moment, so brief you almost think you imagined it, you see them. The convoy, racing south now instead of north, and there are more cars in it than there were before. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Every vehicle that ever crashed on this highway, every driver who ever died on this stretch of concrete that was built in the 1960s by tearing apart neighborhoods and displacing thousands and cutting a scar through the heart of Seattle that never quite healed. You walk the bike the remaining 3 miles to your apartment building. It takes an hour and a half, longer than if you'd just taken the bus, but you make it. You make it home and you're alive, and you're not part of that convoy. Yet. But you know you'll see them again. You know that every time you ride I-5 after midnight, they'll be watching from between the lanes, from behind the concrete barriers, from the places where the highway passes over the neighborhoods it destroyed. And you know that one night, your hands will lock on the controls again. And this time, you won't get them free in time. And you'll hit that barrier at 115 miles per hour and join the eternal race, forever driving north on a highway that was built on displacement and death, and has never forgotten what it cost to carve it through a living city. The permit in your backpack is 2 weeks expired, but you're betting no one checks this far into the Washington Park Arboretum at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. The SR 520 ghost ramps have been a local legend since your dad was in high school. Unfinished overpasses that lead nowhere. Remnants of the R.H. Thompson Expressway that angry citizens killed in 1970 before it could carve through Seattle's Central District and destroy hundreds of homes. You've photographed abandoned places across Washington. Old mental hospitals, defunct military bases, collapsed mining towns. But somehow, you've never made it here. To these concrete pillars rising out of the wetlands like ancient ruins of a future that never happened. You're documenting them for a photography project before they're demolished next month. Part of the state's plan to replace the 520 bridge. The ramps have become symbols of citizen activism. Proof that ordinary people can stop bulldozers and politicians when they organize. Your photos will capture that history, that victory. At least that's what you told yourself when you packed your camera gear and drove here after your shift at the Amazon warehouse ended at 10. The truth is simpler. You're broke, behind on rent, and this portfolio might land you actual photography work instead of scanning packages 40 hours a week. The ramps loom ahead, visible through the trees. There are 2 main structures. Massive concrete pillars supporting roadways that climb 40 feet into the air before simply stopping, as if a giant knife had sliced through the highway mid-construction. Your flashlight catches graffiti covering the lower sections. Tags from the 1990s layered over tags from the 1980s. Peace signs and profanity and declarations of love that have weathered 50 years of rain. Vines have claimed large sections of the concrete, and small trees grow from cracks in the road's surface above. Nature is slowly reclaiming what humans abandoned. You set up your first shot, a long exposure of the ramp against the night sky, light painting the concrete to bring out texture. Through the camera's viewfinder, the structure looks even more surreal. More like architecture from a fever dream than actual infrastructure. As the 30-second exposure runs, you notice something odd. There are tire marks on the ramp. Fresh tire marks, dark rubber against gray concrete, leading up the incline and disappearing where the road ends. That's impossible. The ramps have been fenced off for years, and besides, they don't connect to anything. You can see where they terminate, see the empty air beyond the edge. No car could drive up there. You pack up the tripod and climb the embankment to get a closer look. The fence is intact, no gaps large enough for a vehicle. But the tire marks are undeniable. They're recent, maybe hours old. The rubber's still slightly tacky when you touch it. And they don't stop at the fence. They go through it, or around it, or they were made by something that didn't need an opening. The marks lead up the ramp at a steady angle, and you follow them on foot, your flashlight beam bouncing off the concrete. At the top, where the road ends and 40 feet of empty air begins, the tire marks continue. They don't curve away or stop. They drive straight off the edge into nothing. You lean over carefully, shining your light down, expecting to see a crashed vehicle in the wetlands below. But there's nothing. Just dark water and reeds and the reflection of your flashlight. The tire marks simply vanish at the edge, as if the car that made them kept driving on a road that doesn't exist. You're about to head back down when you notice the air has changed. It's thicker somehow, pressing against your skin, and there's a sound, distant at first, but growing louder. Traffic. You hear traffic, the whoosh of cars at highway speed, the rumble of trucks changing lanes. But that's impossible. You're in the middle of the Arboretum, half a mile from the nearest road, and even the 520 bridge is too far away to hear clearly. Yet the sound is unmistakable, and it's coming from ahead of you, from the empty air where the ramp should continue but doesn't. You step closer to the edge, right up to where the concrete ends, and your flashlight beam does something it shouldn't. Instead of shooting out into empty space, it hits something solid. Not a wall exactly. The air itself seems to have gained substance, become translucent, like looking through frosted glass. And on the other side, visible in your flashlight's beam, is more road. The ramp continues, climbing higher, banking into a curve that shouldn't exist. Cars are driving on it. You can see their headlights, see the red glow of taillights, see the highway stretching off into the distance above the Arboretum. Your rational mind insists this is impossible, that you're seeing things, that the expired energy drink you chugged at the warehouse has finally poisoned your brain. But your camera doesn't hallucinate. You raise it and fire off shots, the flash illuminating that translucent barrier between here and there, capturing the impossible highway that exists in some other version of Seattle. Through the viewfinder, you see more details. The cars are old, 1970s era, with boxy frames and chrome bumpers. And the highway is massive, 6 lanes wide, cutting through landscape that shouldn't be highway at all. You lower the camera, and the barrier looks more solid now, less translucent, almost like real concrete. You reach out slowly, expecting your hand to pass through empty air, but your fingertips touch something hard and cold. The highway is there, the R.H. Thompson Expressway, the one that was never built, the one that citizens killed before it could destroy neighborhoods. It's there, real, waiting. And as you stand with your palm pressed against impossible concrete, you understand what you're seeing. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, a parallel, another Seattle. One where the protests failed, where the expressway was built, where the road didn't stop but kept going, carving a scar through the Central District exactly as planned. The barrier dissolves under your hand. One moment it's solid, the next your arm is through it up to the elbow, and the temperature drops 20 degrees on the other side. The traffic sounds are deafening now, and you can smell exhaust, hot asphalt, that distinctive highway smell of rubber and gasoline and friction. You pull your arm back, but the barrier doesn't reform. The opening is expanding, growing wider, inviting you through, showing you what could have been, what was, in some other timeline where activism failed and the bulldozers won. You step through because you're an idiot, because documenting the impossible is better than documenting abandoned concrete, because your photography career is going nowhere and this, whatever this is, might be the shot that changes everything. The moment you cross the threshold, the sound hits like a physical force. The highway is packed with traffic, cars racing past at 70 miles per hour just inches from where you're standing. They're all vintage vehicles, nothing newer than 1975, and they're covered in grime like they've been driving for decades without stopping. You turn back and the ghost ramps are still there, but they're not abandoned anymore. The concrete is new, pristine, the graffiti gone. The vines are gone. The trees growing from cracks don't exist because there are no cracks. This version of the expressway was finished, maintained, used. And stretching beyond it, visible in the glow of sodium lights, is a Seattle you don't recognize. The familiar skyline is wrong. Too many buildings, too much sprawl, and running through it all like a concrete river is this highway, the R.H. Thompson Expressway, splitting neighborhoods that you know from your Seattle, destroying communities that you've walked through, erasing the Central District to create 8 lanes of northbound and southbound traffic. A car swerves toward you, and you jump back, your shoulder hitting the concrete barrier. The driver is shouting, but you can't hear the words over the traffic. His face is wrong, too gaunt, too exhausted, eyes sunken like he hasn't slept in years. The car behind him is the same, and the one behind that. All the drivers look hollowed out, ancient, like they've been trapped on this highway since 1970, since the day the expressway opened, driving in endless loops because there's nowhere else to go, no exits, no escape from the infrastructure that devoured their neighborhoods. You start walking along the shoulder, camera raised, documenting this nightmare version of Seattle. Through the lens you can see more details. The highway goes on forever, overpasses stacked 3 and 4 levels deep in some places. Interchanges that spiral into impossible geometries. And beneath it, in the gaps, between the pillars, you can see what it destroyed. Houses buried under concrete. Streets that dead end into highway barriers. Parks paved over. The Central District isn't just divided, it's gone, replaced by this endless river of traffic that serves no purpose except to keep flowing. You reach an exit ramp and take it, descending into a Seattle that should be familiar, but isn't. The street signs show names you recognize: 23rd Avenue, Union Street, Madison. But the buildings are wrong. Everything is crushed together, squeezed into the narrow strips of land between highway pillars. The businesses are closed, abandoned. Houses sit empty, their windows broken, graffiti covering walls that say things like, "They promised this would help," and "We should have fought harder." You find a newspaper in a trash can, the Seattle Times, dated October 27, 2025. Today's date. The headline reads, R.H. Thompson Expressway celebrates 55 years. Was the price worth it? The article talks about traffic that never improved, about the Central District that ceased to exist, about the neighborhoods that were destroyed for a highway that solved nothing, about the 10,000 people displaced, the 100,000 more who left Seattle because the city became unlivable, cut into isolated islands by expressways that made it impossible to walk anywhere, impossible to exist without a car. Further down the page is a smaller article. Anniversary of Montlake disaster remains Seattle's darkest day. You read with growing horror about a multi-car pileup on the R.H. Thompson Expressway in 1971, barely a year after it opened. A semi-truck lost control near the Montlake interchange, where 6 levels of highway converged in a knot of concrete and asphalt. The truck hit a support column, and the structure, already showing cracks from rushed construction, collapsed. 3 levels of highway fell into the 4th, creating a cascade failure. 200 cars, 347 dead, the highest death toll from a single traffic accident in American history. And they kept the highway open, kept it running, because the alternative was admitting the whole project had been a mistake from the start. You need to leave. This Seattle isn't yours, isn't real, can't be real. You run back toward where you entered, back to the ghost ramps that aren't ghosts in this timeline. But the highway above you is endless, stretching in all directions, and you can't find the opening. You can't find the way back to your Seattle, the Seattle where people protested, where activists chained themselves to bulldozers, where the Black Panthers and college students and neighborhood groups came together and said no, and actually won. You're panicking now, spinning in circles, trying to remember which ramp you descended, which direction leads back. Every overpass looks the same. Every concrete pillar is identical. And the traffic never stops, never slows, an eternal flow of vehicles, driven by people who look dead, who maybe are dead, who've been driving since 1970 and will keep driving forever because that's what this highway does. It takes everything, consumes everything, and never lets go. Then you see her. A woman standing on the shoulder, watching you with eyes that look wrong, too knowing. She's wearing clothes from the 1960s, a simple dress, practical shoes. And she's holding a protest sign that reads, "Save our neighborhood." The sign is spattered with something dark that might be paint or might be blood. She points behind you, not speaking, and you turn to see the opening. The ghost ramps as you know them, concrete ending in midair, the translucent barrier between worlds clearly visible now. You run for it. Don't look back. Don't think about the woman or the sign or what her presence means. You hit the barrier at full speed, and it gives, stretches like rubber, then snaps you through into your Seattle, your timeline, your world where the expressway was killed before it could be born. You tumble down the ramp and land hard on the muddy embankment, gasping, your camera swinging on its strap and cracking against a rock. When you finally catch your breath and stand up, the ghost ramps are just ghost ramps again, abandoned, overgrown, silent. No traffic sounds, no highway lights, just concrete pillars holding up roads that lead nowhere, monuments to what almost happened. To the Seattle that almost died. You check your camera, praying the fall didn't destroy it, and find the display shows 67 photos. You scroll through them with shaking hands. Most show exactly what you expect. Empty ramps, concrete, graffiti. But the last 15 show the highway, the cars, the nightmare version of Seattle where the protests failed. Proof, evidence. Something that will make people understand what was at stake, what was saved. You drive home and spend the next 3 days processing the images, making prints, preparing a gallery submission. The photos are incredible, eerie, unsettling, layered with meaning about infrastructure and activism and the roads not taken. But when you show them to people, they see only technical skill, only artistic vision. No one believes the story behind them. No one thinks you actually traveled to another Seattle. They assume it's clever Photoshop, composite images, digital manipulation. Let them think that. Because you know the truth. You know that somewhere, in the space where decisions diverge and timelines split, that Seattle still exists. The one where the expressway was built, where the neighborhoods were destroyed, where hundreds died in a collapse that was all but inevitable. And the ghost ramps, soon to be demolished, soon to be nothing but a preserved monument and a commemorative plaque. They're not just bridges to nowhere. They're bridges to somewhere. To the world that almost was. To the catastrophe that was narrowly averted by people who refused to give up. Every time you drive past the Arboretum now, you look for the woman with the protest sign. She's never there. But sometimes, late at night when traffic is light, you swear you can hear it. The distant sound of cars on a highway that was never built. The eternal flow of vehicles through a Seattle that died so your Seattle could live. And you're grateful, deeply grateful to the activists who fought, and the citizens who voted, and the people who said no when saying yes would have been easier. Because the alternative is still there. Still waiting in the gaps between finished and unfinished, between what was and what could have been. The ghost ramps are coming down next month. Good. Let them go. Some ghosts deserve to rest. But you'll keep the photos, keep the proof. Keep the memory of that other Seattle as a reminder that infrastructure isn't destiny, that highways aren't inevitable, that sometimes the best thing you can build is nothing at all. You make the mistake at 3:47 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in late October, when the light is already fading and the Iron Goat Trail parking lot is empty except for your Subaru. The mistake is thinking you're smarter than the dozens of paranormal investigators who've come here before, that your new voice recorder and thermal camera will somehow capture what they missed. That shouting into the darkness of the old Cascade Tunnel will get you the evidence you need for your YouTube channel without any consequences. You've been researching the Wellington avalanche for 3 months. 96 people dead in 1910, buried under snow and ice, bodies not recovered until July. And every source mentions the same things. Screams in the tunnel, hands-grabbing hikers, equipment malfunctions, park rangers who refuse to visit after sunset. The hike to the tunnel takes 40 minutes, following the old railway grade through increasingly dense forest. Your boots crunch on gravel that was laid down over a century ago, when this was a functioning rail line instead of a memorial to disaster. The trees press close on both sides, Douglas firs and western hemlocks that block what little daylight remains. And by the time you reach the tunnel entrance at 4:30, you're walking through twilight that feels more like midnight. The mouth of the tunnel is massive, easily 20 feet high and 15 wide, carved through solid rock in the 1890s. A rusted gate blocks the entrance with "Danger, do not enter" signs wired to the bars. But like every barrier meant to keep people out, it has gaps. You squeeze through where the gate doesn't quite meet the rock wall, your jacket snagging on metal, and step into darkness that swallows your headlamp beam after 15 feet. The temperature drops immediately, at least 20 degrees colder inside than out. Your breath fogs in the beam of your headlamp, and the sound changes. Outside, you could hear wind in the trees, birds, the distant rush of water in the Thai River. Inside, there's only silence so complete it makes your ears ring. You walk deeper, counting steps to track your distance. And at 50 paces, you turn on your voice recorder and thermal camera. The camera shows the tunnel walls at a steady 42 degrees, exactly what you'd expect for a space carved into a mountain. Nothing anomalous, nothing interesting. You walk another 100 paces to where the tunnel curves slightly and you can't see daylight behind you anymore. And that's where you do it. That's where you make the mistake. You cup your hands around your mouth and shout, "Is anyone here? If you died in the avalanche, if you're still here, I want to tell your story. I want people to remember what happened. Please, give me a sign. Talk to me. Your voice echoes off the stone walls, distorting into something that doesn't quite sound like you anymore, and then fades into that oppressive silence. You wait 30 seconds, then a minute, watching your thermal cameras. Screen. Nothing. Just cold stone and your own breath. You're about to try again when every piece of equipment you're carrying dies simultaneously. The thermal camera's screen goes black. Your headlamp flickers once and cuts out. Your phone, fully charged when you entered the tunnel, shows 0% battery and powers down before you can stop it. Even your backup flashlight, fresh batteries installed this morning, produces nothing when you click the switch. The darkness is absolute, total, the kind of black that makes you question whether your eyes are actually open. And in that darkness, something responds to your question. Piss off. The voice is male, rough, speaking directly into your ear from maybe 6 inches away. But there's no breath, no warmth, no physical presence. Just the voice, so close you can hear the shape of the words in the speaker's mouth, the wetness of his tongue against his teeth. You spin around, backing up until your shoulders hit the tunnel wall, and try to scream, but the sound catches in your throat. Your hands fumble for your phone, for anything. But there's nothing. Just darkness and that voice again. Farther away now, echoing from deeper in the tunnel. We said piss off. You don't want our story. You want views. You want likes. You want money from our deaths. More voices now, layering over each other, coming from all directions. Men, women, children. Some speaking English, others in languages you don't recognize. Swedish, maybe Italian, the tongues of the immigrants who built this railway and died when it betrayed them. They're not shouting. They're whispering. Hundreds of whispers filling the tunnel like wind, and they're all saying the same thing. Get out. Get out. Get out before it takes you too. Get out before the white death comes back. You run. You can't see, can't tell if you're going deeper into the tunnel or back toward the entrance, but you run anyway. Hands extended in front of you, expecting to hit stone, but finding only empty air. The voices follow, staying the same distance behind no matter how fast you move. And underneath the whispers, you hear something else. A rumble, deep and growing. The sound of something massive sliding down a mountain. The avalanche. They're replaying the avalanche, making you hear what they heard in those final seconds before the snow took them. The rumble grows to a roar, and you're screaming now. Actually screaming, and your hands finally hit the gate, and you're squeezing through the gap and tumbling out onto the trail. Outside it's dark, not twilight anymore. Full dark, stars visible through the trees. Your phone is working again, showing 7:23 p.m. You've been in the tunnel for almost 3 hours, though it felt like 10 minutes. The voice recorder in your pocket is warm to the touch, almost hot. And when you pull it out, the plastic casing has warped slightly, melted by heat that shouldn't exist. You don't review the recording. Not here. Not now. You just run back down the trail, following the old railway grade with your restored headlamp bouncing wildly. And you don't stop until you reach your car. The drive back to Seattle takes 2 hours, but you make it in 90 minutes. Too scared to slow down, convinced that if you look in your rearview mirror, you'll see something following you. You don't look. You keep your eyes on the road, and the radio turned up loud enough to drown out any sounds that might be coming from your back seat. When you finally pull into your apartment parking lot in Ballard at 9:15 p.m., you sit in the car for 10 minutes, breathing, trying to process what happened. Equipment malfunction. That's all. Equipment malfunction and panic and the power of suggestion. You'd read too many ghost stories, gotten yourself worked up, and your brain had filled in the gaps with hallucinations. The voice, the whispers, the avalanche sound. None of it was real. You almost believe it until you try to talk. Your mouth opens, but the words that come out aren't yours. We said piss off. It's that same voice from the tunnel, rough and male, speaking through your mouth using your vocal cords. You clamp your jaws shut and the voice stops. But you can feel it now. Something behind your teeth. Something that tastes like copper and stone. Something that remembers being buried under 20 feet of snow for 4 months. Inside your apartment, you dump all your equipment on the kitchen counter and head straight for the bathroom, convinced that brushing your teeth or gargling mouthwash will somehow dislodge whatever hitchhiked home with you. But when you look in the mirror, your reflection is wrong. It's you, but the expression isn't one you're making. Your face is twisted in anger, mouth moving, and the voice comes again. You wanted our story. You called us. You asked us to talk. So we'll talk. We'll tell you everything about the White Death, about the cold, about the waiting. And you'll listen. You'll listen because we're not leaving. You back away from the mirror and trip over your own feet, landing hard on the bathroom floor. From this angle, you can't see your reflection, which helps, but you can still hear it. A constant low murmur coming from somewhere inside your own head. Voices talking over each other, telling stories about the blizzard that lasted 9 days, about being trapped in train cars while snow piled higher and higher, about the lightning strike that finally broke the snow loose, about tumbling 150 feet into the Ty River Gorge, about dying slowly in the wreckage, while survivors above couldn't reach them through the continuing storm. You don't sleep that night. Every time you close your eyes, you see it. Not a vision exactly, but a memory that isn't yours. You're in a Pullman car, wealthy passengers sleeping in berths around you. And you feel the train lurch. Not forward or backward, but sideways. And then you're falling, and the car is tumbling, and everything is screaming metal and shattering glass and crushing snow. You're pinned under a seat, legs broken, and the cold is seeping in, and you know, with the certainty of someone who's already dead, that no one is coming in time. You'll freeze here, or suffocate, or bleed out, and your body won't be found until July, when the snow finally melts and the railroad workers come to remove the wreckage. The memory ends, and you're gasping, sitting up in bed, and your voice is talking without your permission again. Different voice this time, female, younger, with an accent you can't place. I was 17, going to Seattle to meet my fiancé. He worked in the shipyards. We were going to be married in April. I never made it to Seattle. I never made it anywhere. And you, your mouth twists into a smile that's not yours. You wanted to tell my story for views, for money, for fame. So I'll tell it. I'll tell it every day, every hour, every moment for the rest of your life. You asked me to talk. I'm talking. You try to review the audio recording from the tunnel the next morning, hoping it captured nothing, that the whole thing was in your head. But the file is corrupted, the waveforms showing patterns that don't match sound. Your audio software can't open it. When you try to delete it, the file refuses to go away, keeps reappearing on your desktop no matter how many times you drag it to the trash. Finally, you force yourself to play it through a basic media player. And what comes out of your speakers isn't voices. It's breathing. 96 people breathing in unison, shallow and panicked. The sound of people slowly suffocating under tons of snow. The breathing goes on for the entire 3-hour runtime, never stopping, never changing. Just 96 sets of lungs fighting for air that won't come. You call in sick to work Monday. and Tuesday. By Wednesday, your boss is threatening to fire you, but you can't go in because you can't stop talking. Every few minutes, another voice takes over. Different person, different story, different memory of the avalanche. Sometimes it's a railroad worker who died in the mail car, crushed when the avalanche drove the car against the mountainside. Sometimes it's a child who was traveling with her mother to Portland, didn't even wake up when the snow hit, just died in her sleep. Sometimes it's one of the 5 bodies that were never recovered, still buried somewhere on that mountain, speaking from a grave that has no marker. You try to apologize to the tunnel. You drive back to Stevens Pass, hike the Iron Goat Trail in broad daylight with families and tourists around you. Stand at the tunnel entrance and say you're sorry, you were wrong. You'll never exploit their tragedy again. But the gate is locked tighter than before. Recent repairs making the gaps too small to squeeze through, and besides, apologizing to an empty tunnel won't help. They're not in the tunnel anymore. They're in you. 96 passengers and crew who've been waiting 115 years to tell someone what happened, who finally found a person stupid enough to ask. Your friends stop calling after you leave 3-minute voicemails in languages you don't speak. Your family stages an intervention that ends with you speaking in a child's voice about drowning in snow, about mommy's arms holding tight but not tight enough, about the cold and the dark and the forever waiting. They call a priest, then a psychiatrist, then finally accept that something is wrong with you that medicine can't fix. You quit your job before they can fire you. You stop leaving your apartment except for food delivery. And the voices never stop. They've taken shifts now, organized themselves, each one getting time to tell their story through your mouth. At 3 a.m., you wake up talking about being Alfred Hensel's co-worker, about falling asleep at the wrong end of the car and dying when it split in half. At noon, you make lunch while describing the sound of the hotel patrons rushing out in their nightclothes, searching for survivors. At 7 p.m., you sit in front of your bathroom mirror and watch your face contort into expressions you've never made, while voice after voice explains what it feels like to be wrapped in canvas and tied to a toboggan and dragged down a mountain to be identified. You tried to delete your YouTube channel, but the videos won't delete. They've changed. You never uploaded anything about Iron Goat Trail, but there are videos there now, dozens of them, all uploaded from your account, all showing the interior of the tunnel. Except you're not in them. The camera is stationary, pointed at darkness, and if you watch long enough, you start to see shapes moving in that darkness. Figures in old clothing, faces that look like yours but aren't. 96 people waiting for the next person to come asking for their story. The videos each have millions of views. Your subscriber count is growing exponentially. Comments roll in from accounts that all say the same thing. I heard their story. Now I can't stop hearing it. Now I can't stop telling it. You understand now what you've done. You didn't just give them a voice. You gave them a vector, a way to spread, a method of reproduction. Everyone who watches those videos, everyone who listens to the voices speaking through you, they become carriers too. The Wellington Avalanche killed 96 people in 1910. In 2025, it's still killing, still claiming victims, still burying people alive under the weight of 96 stories that will never stop being told. And it started with you standing in a tunnel at dusk, shouting into the darkness, asking the dead to speak. They spoke. They're still speaking. They'll always be speaking, through your mouth and the mouths of everyone who heard them, forever and ever. A different kind of avalanche that buries the living under the weight of the dead. The delivery app pings at 1:47 a.m., pulling the driver from the drowsy state that comes with sitting in a parked car for too long. Another run, the fifth of the night, and this one's weird. The pickup address is a warehouse in Georgetown. The delivery address is the same warehouse. The note just says, front door to back loading dock. Driver must deliver directly. $50 tip. $50 for carrying something maybe 100 yards inside a building. The driver accepts before thinking too hard about it. Rent is due in 4 days, and the bank account is hovering at $183. Georgetown at 2 a.m. is all closed businesses and empty streets, industrial buildings hulking in the darkness like beached ships. The driver has worked this area before. Late-night deliveries to the Boeing plant, package drops at warehouses that never close. But always with other people around, other cars, signs of life. Tonight the streets are completely empty, and when the GPS announces the destination on the left, the driver has to check twice to make sure it's correct. The building is massive. 3 stories of brick and concrete with bars on the lower windows and a faded sign that reads, Georgetown Morgue, Est 1928. The driver parks in the loading zone and checks the app again. The pickup is at the front entrance, the delivery at the rear loading dock. Simple enough. The customer, listed only as facility management, has left another note. Package on front steps. Bring to loading dock. Do not open. Do not look inside. Must be delivered before 3 a.m. The specificity is unsettling, but $50 is $50. The driver grabs a flashlight from the glove box and heads to the front entrance. The package is there, sitting on the top step, wrapped in thick brown paper and tied with twine like something from another era. It's surprisingly light for its size, maybe 2 feet long, a foot wide, 6 inches deep. No label, no return address, just that brown paper and twine. When the driver picks it up, something inside shifts slightly, making a sound that could be fabric rustling or could be something else. The driver chooses not to think about it, tucks the package under one arm, and walks around the building toward the rear loading dock. The side of the building is darker than it should be. The streetlights somehow not reaching this section, and the flashlight beam seems to get absorbed by the brick rather than reflecting off it. The driver's footsteps echo strangely, each step producing not one sound, but 2. As if someone is walking parallel just on the other side of the wall. Probably just an acoustic quirk of the alley. Probably just the way sound bounces off old buildings. The loading dock comes into view. A raised concrete platform with a metal door set into it. And the driver climbs the steps with the package, ready to set it down and collect that $50 tip. But the door is already open. Not wide open, just cracked, maybe 6 inches, enough to see that the interior is lit by a dim reddish glow that pulses slightly, like a heartbeat. The driver knocks on the doorframe, calls out, "Delivery?" Waits for a response. Nothing. The app shows the customer as active, the delivery as in progress, but there's no one here to receive the package. The driver looks at the time. 2:11 a.m. The note said it had to be delivered before 3 a.m. 49 minutes to spare. Plenty of time to wait for someone to show up. But standing on that loading dock in the dark, holding a package that shifts and rustles when it shouldn't, the driver makes a decision that will define the rest of this night. The door is open. The delivery address is back loading dock. Technically, stepping inside to set the package down counts as delivery. The driver pushes the door wider and steps into that red-lit interior, telling himself it'll take 10 seconds. Set the package down, snap a photo for proof of delivery, get back to the car, collect the tip. 10 seconds maximum. The space inside is not what the driver expected. It's not a warehouse interior, not a storage area or office. It's a hallway, narrow and institutional, with white tile walls that might have been clean once, but are now stained with rust-colored streaks. The red glow comes from emergency lights spaced every 20 feet, giving everything a hellish tint. The hallway extends in both directions. No clear indication of which way leads deeper into the building and which way leads back out. The driver chooses left arbitrarily, walking quickly, looking for a desk or counter or anywhere appropriate to leave a package. Doors line both sides of the hallway, all of them closed, all with small windows at eye level. The driver tries not to look through the windows, but can't help it. Can't resist the impulse to glance inside each room while passing. The first room is empty, just white tile and a drain in the floor. The second room contains a metal table with restraints. The third room has a wall of what look like filing cabinets, except each drawer is easily 6 feet long. Morgue drawers, body storage. The driver walks faster. The package shifts again, more violently this time, and something inside makes a sound. Not rustling, not fabric. A voice. Muffled, distant, like someone speaking from very far away, or through layers of insulation. The driver stops walking, holds the package away from their body, and tries to make out words in the muffled sound. Can't. Whatever is making noise inside the brown paper isn't clear enough to understand. But it's definitely a voice, and it's definitely saying something. And the driver is definitely going to set this package down right now and leave, and never accept another delivery in Georgetown again. But there's nowhere to set it down. The hallway continues in both directions, with no end visible, no desk or counter or flat surface that isn't floor. And the floor feels wrong. Wrong to just drop the package on it and walk away. Wrong in a way the driver can't articulate, but feels deeply. The way you know not to step on certain floorboards in an old house, or not to open certain doors even when you can't explain why. So the driver keeps walking, faster now, looking for anything that resembles a proper delivery location. The voice from inside the package is getting louder. Or not louder, closer. Like whoever's speaking is moving toward the surface, toward the paper, toward the driver's hands. The words are becoming clearer. Help, help us, still trapped. So hot. The smell won't leave. The driver is running now, not caring about noise or protocol or anything except getting rid of this package and getting out of this building. A sign appears ahead, black letters on red background. Crematorium, authorized personnel only. The door beneath the sign is open, and that pulsing red light is brighter here, coming from inside the room. The driver doesn't want to look, doesn't want to see what's in there. But the package is speaking clearly now, multiple voices overlapping, all of them saying variations of the same thing. October 25th, 1968. The meeting. The men with guns. The ropes. The chamber. Help us. We're still here. We're still burning. The driver's hands are shaking so badly the package almost falls, and in a moment of pure panic, throws it through the crematorium doorway and runs. The running leads deeper into the building instead of out. Through hallways that weren't there before, past rooms that shouldn't exist, doors with windows showing impossible things, bodies on tables that sit up when the driver passes, faces pressing against the glass from the inside, hands leaving prints in condensation that hasn't existed in decades. The driver's flashlight flickers and dies, leaving only that pulsing red emergency lighting and the sound of footsteps following. Multiple pairs of feet moving in unison, shuffling like people who've forgotten how to walk properly, who've been still for so long their muscles have forgotten the pattern. A door ahead shows daylight, actual daylight, impossible at 2 a.m., but there it is. And the driver sprints for it, crashes through and stumbles out into an alley that doesn't look quite right. The angle is wrong. The building across the street isn't the one that was there before. And when the driver turns back to look at the door just exited, it's not the loading dock door. It's a front entrance, the one where the package was picked up 10 minutes ago, or 10 hours ago, or yesterday. The driver's phone shows 2:58 a.m. 47 minutes have passed, but it felt like 10 minutes, and the delivery app is pinging repeatedly with messages from the customer. Why did you open the package? The first message. Why did you look inside? The second. Why did you take them out? The third. But the driver didn't open the package, didn't look inside, didn't take anything out. The driver threw the unopened package into the crematorium and ran. The next message is a photo, a security camera screenshot showing the driver standing in that red-lit hallway, holding the package, and it's open. The brown paper is torn, hanging in shreds, and the driver is reaching inside, pulling something out. Except the driver doesn't remember doing that. Doesn't remember opening anything. The final message is an address, not the morgue. A different location in Georgetown, a street that sounds familiar. And the app is updating on its own, adding a new delivery to the queue. No pay information, no customer name. Just that address and a note. Return what you took. You have until sunrise. The driver checks the rearview mirror out of habit and sees something that makes breathing difficult. There are people in the back seat. 9 of them, somehow, impossibly fitting in a space meant for 3. They're all wearing the same expression, mouths open, eyes wide, faces frozen in the moment before death. And they're all burned, badly burned, skin blackened and cracked, clothes melted to flesh. The driver doesn't scream, can't scream. The sound is locked in a throat that won't cooperate. One of them leans forward, close enough that the driver can smell burning, can smell flesh and hair and fabric all rendered down to carbon, and speaks in a voice that sounds like air escaping from a bellows. They forced us into the chamber, locked the door, turned on the fire. We screamed, but the building is soundproofed for cremations. No one heard. We burned for 19 minutes before dying. The pain doesn't stop. Not ever. Even now, all these years later, we're still burning. Still feeling those 19 minutes. The driver manages to turn back to face forward, to grip the steering wheel with hands that have lost all feeling, and starts the car. The address in the app is in Georgetown, only 6 blocks away, and the driver understands with horrible clarity what happened. The package wasn't empty. It contained something tied to that night in 1968, to the Seattle crematorium massacre that remains unsolved, to 9 employees who were bound and burned alive by armed men whose identities were never discovered. The driver opened it, even without remembering opening it, opened it somehow, released something, and now has to return it. The 6-block drive takes forever and no time at all. The address is a house, ordinary and suburban, porch light on, no cars in the driveway. The driver parks and sits there, engine running, trying to figure out what to do, trying to understand what's supposed to be returned when the driver doesn't remember taking anything. The 9 figures in the back seat are still there, and one of them reaches forward, places a burned hand on the driver's shoulder, and the contact brings a vision. No, a memory. Someone else's memory. Standing in the crematorium, opening the package, pulling out 9 photographs, black and white, taken before the murders. 9 people standing in front of the morgue, smiling, employees of Broughton Brothers funeral services, all of them about to die in the worst way imaginable. The driver's pocket is heavy. Shouldn't be heavy. Nothing was in it before. But now there's weight there, and reaching in produces 9 photographs, exactly as seen in the memory. The house across the street has the same number as the delivery address, and the driver understands. This is where one of them lived. Maybe the owner. Maybe the one who knew too much, who was involved in whatever shady business dealings prompted the murders. Return the photographs means acknowledge the crime. Acknowledge what happened. Give them back their humanity instead of letting them remain nameless victims. The driver gets out of the car. The figures in the back seat don't follow, just watch, and walks to the front door. There's a mail slot. The photographs slide through easily, landing on the other side with a soft slap. Nothing happens. The driver stands there, waiting, wondering if this completed the delivery, if the curse or haunting or whatever it is has been lifted. Then the porch light goes out, and the door opens. And standing in the doorway is a man who looks wrong, too old to still be alive if he was involved in 1968. But here he is, and he's looking at the photographs on his floor with an expression of absolute horror. "You found them," the old man whispers. "I thought they were destroyed. I thought I was safe. I thought—" He doesn't finish. Behind the driver, visible in the doorway's reflection, 9 figures are approaching from the car, moving in unison, their burned bodies somehow still walking, still capable of movement. The old man sees them too, and his face drains of color. No, it's been 57 years. You can't, you're gone. I made sure you were gone." His words confirm what the driver suspected. He was involved. Maybe not the one who did it, but he knew. He helped. He covered it up. The driver backs away as the 9 figures enter the house. The door closes behind them, and from inside comes screaming. Not the screaming of the burned, their past screaming. This is the screaming of someone who knows exactly what's about to happen to them, who knows that justice delayed for 57 years is still justice, and it's finally here. The driver runs back to the car, hands shaking so badly the key drops twice before successfully starting the engine. The delivery app updates. Delivery complete. $50 tip received. Customer rating, 5 stars. The drive back to the other side of the city takes an hour because the driver refuses to look at the rearview mirror, refuses to confirm whether the back seat is empty or not, refuses to acknowledge the smell of smoke that fills the car. When sunrise comes at 5:47 a.m., the smell dissipates, and checking the mirror finally shows empty seats. The driver sits in a Starbucks parking lot, hands wrapped around coffee that's gone cold, scrolling through news, articles about the Georgetown Morgue, about the Seattle crematorium massacre, about 9 employees who died in October 1968 and whose murderers were never found. Until tonight, until a delivery driver followed instructions, returned 9 photographs, and gave 9 ghosts the only thing they wanted: someone to punish who knew the truth and never told. The driver deletes the delivery app, finds a new job within the week, never goes back to Georgetown. But sometimes, late at night, the phone pings with a delivery request from an address on East Marginal Way South. The driver never accepts, because some deliveries cost more than they pay, and some customers don't want packages. They want witnesses. They want accomplices. They want someone to complete what they started in 1968, one delivery at a time, one photograph at a time, until everyone who knew and stayed silent has been found. You shouldn't be on Mountain Loop Highway at 11 p.m. on a Thursday in late October. But the GPS insisted this was the fastest route from Darrington back to Seattle after visiting your friend's cabin. The main highway was closed for overnight construction, and this detour, 54 miles of winding 2-lane road through national forest, promised to save 40 minutes despite looking like it belonged in a horror movie. You've been driving for 30 minutes now, haven't seen another car in 20, and the road keeps twisting through darkness so complete, your headlights seem to create the world rather than illuminate it. Trees press close on both sides, and occasionally your high beams catch eyes reflecting from the forest. Deer, you tell yourself, though they seem too high off the ground and too red to be anything you want to think about. The first sign appears at milepost 17, catching your attention because it's not an official highway marker. Someone has painted over a speed limit sign, crude white letters against green. Turn back, 50 miles to your death. Vandalism, obviously. Kids from Granite Falls or Darrington with spray paint and too much time. You drive past it without slowing, though something about the specificity, 50 miles, not just turn back or danger, makes your hands tighten on the steering wheel. You check your odometer, 47,182 miles. You'll remember this number later, though you don't know why you notice it now. The vehicle appears in your rearview mirror 10 minutes later. You don't see it arrive. One moment the mirror shows empty road behind you, the next there are headlights, maybe a quarter-mile back, matching your speed exactly. Except they're not headlights. The vehicle is driving without lights, just a dark shape moving through darker night, and you can only see it when your taillights illuminate its front end. It's an old car, 1970s vintage from the boxy silhouette, and it's gaining on you despite the fact that you're already doing 55 on a road posted at 45. You accelerate to 60, then 65, taking curves faster than you should, and the vehicle keeps pace. It's close enough now that you can see details in your mirror. A sedan, American-made with a grille that looks like a grimace, and a hood that's crumpled on the passenger side like it's hit something or been hit. The windshield is spider-webbed with cracks, and where the driver should be visible, there's only darkness, a void in the shape of a person behind the wheel. You round a sharp curve and for a moment lose sight of it. And in that moment, you hope it was your imagination, stress and exhaustion creating threats from shadows. Then you hear the crash, the unmistakable sound of metal hitting wood, of a vehicle leaving the road at high speed and colliding with something solid. It comes from behind you, from the curve you just navigated. And your first instinct is to stop, to help. Because that's what decent people do when they hear accidents. But something keeps your foot on the gas. Some animal instinct that knows stopping would be worse than whatever guilt comes with driving away. You watch your mirror, expecting to see nothing, expecting the road to stay empty. The vehicle appears again, closer now, maybe 50 feet back. It's more damaged than before. The driver's side is crumpled inward, the door hanging at an angle, and something dark is leaking from underneath, leaving a trail on the road that reflects your taillights like oil but moves wrong, too thick, too alive. The windshield is completely gone now, and through the empty frame you can see the driver clearly. It's not human. Or it was human once, but isn't anymore. Skin pulled too tight over bones that are the wrong shape. Jaw hanging open impossibly wide, eyes that are just empty sockets filled with that same darkness. You floor it. The engine roars, and the speedometer climbs to 70, 80, speeds that are suicidal on this road. But the alternative is letting that thing catch you. Another curve comes too fast, and you take it too wide. Tires screaming, the car sliding toward the shoulder and the drop-off beyond. You correct just in time, heart hammering, and in that moment of distraction, the vehicle draws even closer. It's 20 feet back. 10. You can hear its engine now, a grinding sound like metal eating metal. And underneath that, a noise that might be breathing, or might be wind through a destroyed chassis, or might be something worse. The second sign appears on the shoulder. Turn back 30 miles to your death. You've only driven maybe 8 miles since the first sign. The math doesn't work. But your odometer shows you've traveled 12 miles, which also doesn't work because mile markers show you've covered 7. The numbers are wrong in every direction, time and distance and speed, all becoming unreliable. And behind you, the vehicle is so close now that when it hits your bumper, a gentle tap, almost playful. The impact sends your car fishtailing. You regain control and push harder. 90 miles per hour now, taking curves blind and praying nothing is coming the other way. The vehicle drops back slightly, and for a moment you think you've outrun it. Then you hear the second crash, louder this time, the sound of a vehicle rolling, metal crumpling and glass shattering. And it's so close you're sure it happened right behind you. You risk a glance in the mirror and see the road is empty. 3 seconds of empty. 5. It reappears right on your bumper, and now it's destroyed. The roof is caved in completely, all the windows gone. The entire passenger side sheared off like it's been torn apart by giant hands. The frame is twisted into shapes that metal shouldn't hold, and the thing driving it, because it's definitely not human anymore, definitely never was, is partially crushed into the seat. Upper body bent at an angle that would kill anyone living. But it's still driving, still following, still coming for you with that mechanical inevitability that says you can't escape, you can never escape. This hunt ends only one way. Another sign? Turn back 10 miles to your death. You've driven maybe 5 miles since the last one. The countdown is accelerating, or you're accelerating toward it. Or time itself is collapsing the distance between you and whatever waits at the end of this pursuit. The vehicle hits you again, harder this time, and your car lurches forward, engine stuttering. The steering pulls hard to the right, toward the shoulder, toward the darkness beyond, and you fight it with arms that are shaking so badly you can barely grip the wheel. The crash comes differently this time. Instead of hearing it behind you, you see it ahead. The same destroyed sedan appearing on the road in front of you, driving backward at high speed, its ruined front end facing you like a mouth full of broken teeth. It's impossible. It's behind you and ahead of you simultaneously. And when you swerve to avoid the one in front, you feel the one behind ram your bumper. And both vehicles are the same vehicle. Existing in 2 places at once, or maybe existing in no places, just pursuing you through every configuration of space until there's nowhere left to run. You take the next curve too fast and feel the tires break loose, feel the car start to slide. This is it, you think. This is how it ends. Wrapped around a tree on Mountain Loop Highway, another fatal accident. Another statistic in a long list of vehicles that left the road on blind curves and killed everyone inside. The newspapers will say you were speeding, probably drunk or high or distracted, and no one will ever know about the phantom car, about the thing that chased you to your death. But you correct the slide somehow. Muscle memory or luck or divine intervention, and the car straightens out. The phantom vehicle is gone. You check all mirrors and see only empty road, darkness, the trees pressing close. Your speedometer shows 45 miles per hour, though you have no memory of slowing down. Your odometer shows 47,440 miles, 58 miles since you first noticed the number, though you've driven maybe 25. Ahead, the final sign, turn back, you're here. And beyond it, planted directly in the middle of the road, is the sedan. Not moving, not chasing, just waiting. It's completely destroyed now, every panel crumpled, every window shattered, the frame compressed and twisted until it barely resembles a vehicle anymore. It looks like something that's been crashing for decades. rolling and burning and colliding over and over, accumulating damage from 1,000 accidents across 50 years of pursuing drivers on this remote highway. You slam on the brakes, but the car won't slow. You're coasting, foot off the gas, but accelerating toward the wreck as if being pulled by invisible cables. The distance closes. 100 feet, 50, 20, and through the destroyed windshield, you see not one driver, but dozens, layered over each other like multiple exposures. Every person who died on this highway, occupying the same space, driving the same phantom vehicle, pursuing the next victim as they were pursued. Your car stops 3 inches from the wreck. Just stops, engine dying, every system failing simultaneously. The silence is absolute. Then the driver's door of the phantom sedan opens, and something unfolds from the crushed interior. Too many limbs, too many faces. Decades of the dead compressed into one impossible form. It reaches for your door handle. You watch the hands, dozens of them overlapping, moving as one, all wearing the injuries that killed them. Some are burned, some are crushed, some are simply gone, bone showing through torn flesh. The hand touches your door and freezes there, not opening it, waiting. You understand suddenly what this is. Not a hunt, an invitation. The phantom car needs a driver, needs another victim to join the collective, to add their death to the accumulation of tragedies that patrol this highway. Every fatal accident, every car that left the road, every driver who died on Mountain Loop Highway, they're all here, compressed into one vehicle, one entity, forever chasing the living toward the same curves and trees and barriers that killed them. You close your eyes, and when you open them, the phantom is gone. Your car starts on the first try. The road ahead is clear. You drive the remaining 30 miles to Granite Falls at exactly 45 miles per hour. Hands locked on the wheel, eyes straight ahead. At the city limits, you pull over and vomit in a ditch, shaking so hard your teeth chatter. Your phone shows 17 missed calls from your friend, wondering why you never confirmed you made it home safe. The timestamp shows they started calling 4 hours ago, though you've only been driving for 90 minutes. You never take Mountain Loop Highway again. But sometimes, late at night, you drive past the turnoff and you see it waiting at the entrance. The phantom sedan, mostly intact now. Its damage reset, ready to pursue someone else. And you know that somewhere on that dark highway, another driver is being herded toward their death. Another vehicle is crashing and crashing again and never stopping. Another victim is about to join the collective that hunts these roads forever. The highway remembers. The dead remember. And they're always looking for the next person to join them in the eternal pursuit. If these stories kept you up at night, if they made you think twice about driving alone on dark roads, then subscribe to Verified Souls for more bone-chilling horror stories that will haunt your nightmares. Every week, we bring you true tales from America's most terrifying locations. Roads where the dead still walk, highways where physics breaks down, and places where saying the wrong thing to the wrong entity changes your life forever. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our family of horror enthusiasts who understand that the scariest stories are the ones that could happen to anyone, anywhere, on any dark and lonely road. Welcome to Verified Fears, where every story is a journey into fear you won't forget.